governor's speaking out. Governor Pritzker is saying that this is an invasion, that Trump is invading his state. And Governor Newsom, Gavin Newsom of California, just came right out and said it. He said, America is on the brink of martial law. Do not be silent. Pritzker said, we must now start calling this what it is, Trump's invasion. It started with federal agents. It will soon include deploying federalized members of the Illinois National Guard against our wishes, and it will now involve sending in another state's military troops. And then our congresswoman here in Portland, Maxine Dexter, she said, the president is abusing his power, attempting to militarize our cities. The power of the people must remain greater than the people in power. We need to show up in peaceful protest across the nation. Stay loud. She added, we cannot rest. The president is abusing his power, attempting to militarize our cities. Yeah. Meanwhile, Stephen Miller goes nuts. He says, the issue before us now is simple and clear. There is a large and growing movement of left-wing terrorism in this country. It is well organized and well funded and shielded by far-left Democrat judges, prosecutors, and attorneys general. The only remedy is to use legitimate, and then ... force, basically. But here in Portland, we've figured out how to respond. The naked bike ride is cranking itself up. Seriously, they sent out an email to everybody, and they've got 10 pieces of basic advice. No shame in wearing underwear. Wear sensible shoes. Hairy individuals should avoid duct tape. Bring a fanny pack. If you ride at night, you must have a white front headlight. Nudity in public area. I didn't know this. Nudity in public areas as a form of protest is protected under Oregon's Constitution. Photography is discouraged for obvious reasons. Touching and lewd comments and staring is not allowed. Ride carefully and buddy or go with the group. And finally, this right-winger, a professor at George Mason University's Scalia Law School, senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Eugene Kontrovich, wrote an op-ed in which he's talking about how the International Criminal Court has already launched an investigation against Donald Trump for militarizing our cities. And, well, actually, his topic was killing the, we don't know if they were tourists or if they were fishermen or if they were out whale watching or whatever, all these people off the coast of Venezuela that we've been blowing up. And he's got advice for Trump on how to attack the International Criminal Court before they have him arrested. Wild stuff. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Ezra Klein's new book, Why We're Polarized. This is from the introduction. And it's a couple pages into it. I'm starting out here. I have found that American politics is best understood by braiding two forms of knowledge that are often left separate: the direct on-the-ground insights shared by politicians, activists, government officials, and other subjects of my reporting, and the more systemic analyses conducted by political scientists, sociologists, historians, and others with the time, methods, and expertise to study American politics at scale. On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravity, evolution, or cognition is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested, special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, it is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by threat or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come election day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status, fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, but cannot be truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive-sum, but identity conflict is zero-sum. The book, Why We're Polarized, by Ezra Klein.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, top of the morning to you. It's a beautiful Tuesday here in Portland. I don't know, how and what it is where you live, but a lot to talk about today. An awful lot to talk about today. Pam Bondi's coming, Kristi Noem is coming to town. Hide your dogs. Is ICE today's Klan? Some of my thoughts on Trump invoking the Insurrection Act and why I'm keeping an eye on Ted Cruz, and will the FAA end the shutdown? It's already starting to look that way. Also, Trump's strange take on getting into heaven. It's a bunch of strange stuff. Trump and his cult followers continue to declare hate and war against half of America. The Republicans should impeach him, but they're cowards. I believe we'll get into that in the second hour. After refusing to hand over voter registration data to the Trump regime, a South Carolina judge's home exploded. Was this politically motivated arson? We're not sure yet, but it sure is looking weird. In the third hour of our program, South Carolina wants to kill women who get abortions again. This is their pro-life position. Literally, they want to execute them. And will Trump pardon Ghislaine Maxwell and get away with it? Interesting question. I mean, we're starting to get some early answers to that. But my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is titled, "Is ICE Today's Klan?" And this idea of having law enforcement officials whose identity is concealed is not new in the United States. In the 1870s and 80s, during Reconstruction, when the Klan did its first, real big, hey, here we are. And then in the 1920s, when they rebooted, historians refer to it as the Second Klan. There was a major revival, and in both cases, in multiple states, the two states that were literally taken over, like from the governor's mansion down, taken over by the Klan. During those, the first in the 1880s was Oregon, and in the 1920s was Indiana. The Klan members were actually deputized as police officers. And now, not just in those two states, but also in other states around the country, particularly in the old Confederate states. And what they were doing was, just going on the attack. They were enforcing the prohibition rules against drinking, mostly black speakeasies, and they were enforcing the anti-integration or the segregation laws, or apartheid, here in the United States that lasted right up until the 1960s legally. And, arguably in many ways continues to this day. ICE, and the whole reason why some of these Klan members actually, with a badge on, were wearing their hoods. And the reason why was so that they wouldn't be held accountable. It's just very simple. You wear a mask because what you're doing is wrong. You know it's wrong, and you do not want to be held accountable for the crimes you commit. We've had 2 people shot in Chicago so far. Right? One of them is dead. 2 people shot by ICE. We'll probably never know who fired the gun because ICE isn't telling anybody in violation of the law. And these guys, there's no way to know their identities because they're so masked up. This is just, fundamentally wrong. And, there are 19 states that have passed laws forbidding people from wearing masks. I'm not talking about the couple states who tried to do this during COVID. I'm talking about most of these laws were either passed in the 1880s or in the 1950s. Two periods of time when there were major pushbacks against the Klan here in the United States and at the state level across the country. And California, for example, has an 1872 ordinance that outlaws, quote, mask, false whiskers, or any personal disguise, whether complete or partial, when invading or escaping discovery, recognition, or identification, the commission of any public offense. And we talked yesterday about how under California state law, what ICE is doing without having judicial warrants. They don't have warrants signed by judges per the Fourth Amendment. And so, they're what they're doing, like, for example, when they attacked that office building in Chicago, the apartment building in Chicago, is kidnapping and assault and violence against property, vandalism. So under all of these state laws, these 19 state laws, or under most of them anyway, individual ICE members could be prosecuted for breaking the law. For breaking the law while wearing a mask. The most recent is California's No Secret Police Act. Scott Wiener, who was the principal author of this, said, as this authoritarian regime seeks to demolish our constitutional rights and engages in a straight-up terror campaign, California is meeting the Trump administration's secret police tactics with strength and defiance. He says no one wants masked officers roaming their communities and kidnapping people with impunity. And he says California will continue to stand up for the rule of law and for basic freedoms. So far, Gavin Newsom has chosen not to enforce the law. He's letting ICE agents in California get away with the state crime that they are now committing. None of them have been arrested. None of them have been charged with a crime. And they're continuing to do their Kavanaugh raids. It was Brett Kavanaugh who wrote the opinion in the shadow docket ruling that said that ICE can use racial profiling to go after people. And like I said, in Chicago, they've already shot 2 people, killing 1. So the question isn't whether ICE agents share the Klan's ideology. I'm sure some do. In fact, I suspect many do. I mean, their recruiting kind of leans in that direction, shall we say. But the question is instead whether our government has once again created a Klan-like system in which anonymous armed men can break into your home, detain you, abuse you, without ever being individually answerable under the law. The hood and the mask have always symbolized essentially the same thing in America. They mean that right-wing thugs can do whatever they want and walk away untouched, no matter how heinous their crimes. We're told that if we have nothing to hide, we have nothing to fear. But when armed officers of the law, of the government, hide their identities from the people they claim to serve, they're telling us exactly what to fear. History has already written the first draft of this story once before. We'd be fools to let it play out again. It's time to start holding ICE accountable to the law. Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with you. Stick around. It's 13 and a half minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
My thoughts on the Insurrection Act and interesting stuff on Ted Cruz. Stick around. We'll be right back. And welcome back. And oops, there we go. All righty, Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hey, not too much, Tom. Look, as far as the Klan being, or ICE being a descendant of the Klan or whatever, connected to the Klan in some way, I don't totally disagree. I'm sure several individuals in there are racist, but they are a symptom of a much larger problem that I always get a yawn and the roll of the eyes on, but we need to pay attention to it. I heard a liberal today, one of my favorite callers on another show. He said, look, we need to be cool. Don't go to the streets unless do everything legally. This is a setup. This is what Trump and Pee Wee German want. They want black and brown people doing violence.
It's true.
No, I get that. I get it, and he's right. But here's the thing. Trump, all right, he tried to deploy the California National Guard to Oregon. All right. Now, when he did that, I keep focusing on your comment about the generals will hold the line. Look, these are some very old, these are legacy conservative ideas. These are the ideas I fought when I was on active duty. Okay, what I mean by that is right now there is, for conservatives, there's absolutely zero interest in the international order, in international law, and there's no interest in the post-World War II order. And what they, how that affects everyday people is, if you look at it, they, like Trump put a cap on immigration or refugee and asylum seeking to the United States. The head of the UNHCR, the UN High Commission on Refugees, said this is a violation of international law. All right, so you go to the Boracay incident. That was the
Dave. What's the point you're trying to make?
The point
you're all over the place here.
Yeah. The point I am trying to make is this militarism, this disregard for the law. All right, there's no way to combat this. Look, there's no way.
Sure, there is. You hold them. You arrest them using state or local law, and you prosecute them in state and local courts.
Yeah, but what? All right, if Trump can use Title 32 and Title 10 to deploy National Guard troops from Texas to enforce federal law in Oregon, it will nullify any court or Oregon court. There's just really no way to do it.
State courts still have state courts still have sovereignty. They still have the power to hold people to account.
Okay, all right, this Operation Midway Drift in Chicago, these people were American citizens. All right, most of them were American citizens.
Right.
Amongst them were like 30-some people from Venezuela or something that were arrested. This was a raid in the middle of the night. It had classified information surrounding it. They even called it Midway Blitz.
What's your
Midway
point?
Blitz.
Right.
My point is, state and local law enforcement will have no choice. They will have no choice but to defer.
They don't. They can take them on, and the way that I think Trump wants it to play out is that state authorities arrest the ICE guys, and then Trump says you can't do that, and you devolve into open warfare between federalized troops in a blue city and the state and the local National Guard or the local police. That's what he wants. He's trying to gin up what he can call an insurrection, so he can invoke the Insurrection Act and lock America down under martial law and suspend the elections of 2026. Dave, thanks for the call. 18 minutes past the hour. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Donald Trump lost, voter suppression won in 2024. That's the headline over at HartmannReport.com, and just a brilliant article written by Greg Palast exclusively for the Hartmann Report. He writes, Trump lost. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency with 286 electoral votes. And if not for the mass purge of voters of color, if not for the mass disqualification of provisional and mail-in ballots, if not for the new mass vigilante challenges in swing states, Harris would have gained at least another 3.5 million votes, topping Trump's popular vote tally by 1.2 million. Greg brings us the numbers. He lays it out. You can read it over at HartmannReport.com, absolutely free. It's titled, Trump Lost, Vote Suppression Won, at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
They come before dawn, in the cold of the grave. Black masks in the mist, and the children pray. They knock on the doors where the weary hearts hide, and the wind carries whispers of those who have cried. They say it's the law, but whose law is it now? The same law that once wore a hood and a vow. His eyes today's cleansed beneath a new command. They hide behind badges, they hide behind plans. If justice is blind, then who leads her hand? His eyes today's Klan.
Yeah, I think ICE is today's Klan. So yesterday, a federal judge did not immediately block Donald Trump sending the California or Texas National Guard here to Portland. And so, you know, they're on their way. In fact, I understand Kristi Noem is going to show up here. You know, hide your dogs, hide your cats sometime today. Trump said he's considering invoking the Insurrection Act of 1803, when the only real insurrection was January 6th. I mean, it was an insurrection that he led. The hypocrisy of this guy, who led an insurrection against the United States of America and then was, you know, impeached for it, claiming that, you know, because you've got 25 people down in front of the ICE building here in Portland laying flowers on the street, that we've got a friggin' insurrection going on, and the head of DHS is coming today to see how the city's on fire. It's not. I mean, the biggest thing that's planned right now is a naked bike ride in protest of ICE. And it's just the way, this is just the peak of hypocrisy. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what happens today when Kristi Noem comes to town. I am hoping that my fellow Portlanders, you know, keep it calm, as they by and large have so far. We'll see. Meanwhile, keep an eye on Ted Cruz. This is interesting. Ted Cruz has all but announced that he's running for president in 2028. I mean, here we are, you know, 2.5 years, about 2 years before the primaries begin, but maybe a year and a half before the primaries begin. But, you know, he's out there and he's making all the noises, and he's making the noises that he's basically like, I'm the actual conservative. In other words, he's taking on MAGA. MAGA is, you know, this reactionary group, this let's get revenge group, this let's end democracy group. And then you've got the, you know, the old-fashioned conservatives saying, well, no, we're okay with democracy. We like to rig the system when we can. We'll purge people from voting rolls and stuff like that. But, you know, we don't want to overtly end democracy in America. So Cruz is coming out saying this stuff. He's been doing it for a couple of days. And there were even jokes about it today when he was questioning Pam Bondi, him and Senator Kennedy joking about it. And Trump is going to do one of two things. Trump is either going to get pissed off because he himself intends to stand for election in 2028, assuming that we still have elections, but, you know, also assuming that they'll be heavily rigged. So Trump himself wants to stand for election in 2028. If he seriously intends to do that, then he's going to shut down Ted Cruz. On the other hand, if Ted Cruz seriously wants to be president and he's willing to challenge Trump, he's going to challenge Trump. And so we might be seeing the first kind of cracking open of what's going on here, you know, in the battle between this reactionary MAGA group, this fascist MAGA group, and the Republicans who've like kind of gone along to get along because they're afraid of Trump and they're afraid of all the money he's got and all the money he controls and all, you know, the ways that he can damage them. But they're ultimately not really comfortable with this. They would really rather not have America, turn into a fascist nation. So, and I'm not necessarily speaking for or about Ted Cruz, but he's making noises like that. So we'll see. But Trump, has come right out and said, that he's open. He says, you look at what's happened in Portland over the years, it's a burning hellhole. And Stephen Miller says that the administration has been contending with a legal insurrection, and that judges' rulings stifling the will of the Trump administration is, quote, an insurrection against the laws and Constitution of the United States. This at the same time that the judge who refused to turn over the election files to Washington, D.C., to Donald Trump, her house exploded yesterday. And finally, along these same lines of, what's happening in the Republican Party, this is Marge Green. Marjorie Taylor Greene posted yesterday on X, and I quote, "I'm carving my own lane, and I'm absolutely disgusted that health insurance premiums will double if the tax credits expire this year." Say what? Now, that's what the Democrats are saying. This is why they won't go along with this continuing resolution. So is the MAGA beginning to crack? Is the GOP starting to fracture? Marge Green goes on, she says, "Also, I think health insurance and all insurance is a scam, just to be clear, but not a single Republican in leadership talked to us about this or has given us a plan to help Americans deal with their health insurance premiums doubling." So here you've got now Ted Cruz in a soft revolt, as it were, and Marjorie Taylor Greene in an open revolt. You've got Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene and one other, Nancy Mace, saying that they're going to support the release of the Epstein files, this discharge petition. And of course, Mike Johnson is refusing to swear in Adelita Grijalva because she will be the 218th vote, which will force this thing to the floor, where there will be a vote on the discharge, on this discharge petition. There'll be a vote on whether or not Congress gets to see the Epstein files. And so Mike Johnson is doing everything he can to bury this stuff. Pam Bondi, same thing this morning. She was asked about it in these hearings in the Senate. "I won't answer. Not going to talk to you, Senator."
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Is the GOP cracking? Is that what we're seeing? Or are these just kind of little bits around the edges? We'll be right back.
For our Thom Hartmann Book Club excerpt today, we're reading from Ed Morales' new book, Fantasy Island, Colonialism, Exploitation, and the Betrayal of Puerto Rico. This is from the first chapter. There was never any doubt that the United States wanted Puerto Rico for its own when it began a war with Spain near the turn of the 20th century. Cuba had been in the throes of independence war with Spain off and on since 1868, and the conflict that began in 1895 seemed ripe for the United States to capitalize on. The sinking of the USS Maine, an American naval ship destroyed by an explosion while moored just outside Havana, fueled American entry into the war. Although there are conflicting theories about the source of the explosion, including the likelihood it was caused by a spontaneous internal fire, William Randolph Hearst's newspaper chain blew up the incident into the perfect catalyst for the United States to enter the conflict. When Theodore Roosevelt entered the fray with his army of Rough Riders, the whole affair came as no surprise to anyone who'd been paying attention to the lust U.S. government leaders and military had long expressed to expand southward and westward. And although the idea of manifest destiny was at the forefront of the political discourse of this period, it's less often observed that the United States' expansionist gaze was saturated with racial language and attitudes, at once desirous of and repelled by Latin America's mestizo mulatto social dynamic. The Haitian Revolution at the end of the 19th century and into the 20th created a U.S. obsession with both Cuba and Puerto Rico because of the potential of a similar black-led revolt on those islands. In 1826, Virginia Senator John Randolph feared that such a revolt would render the southern United States vulnerable to invasion from Cubans in rowboats. For this reason, he objected to the United States participating in the 1826 Panama Congress because American diplomats would have to endure the horror of a U.S. diplomat taking his seat in the Congress, quote, beside the native African, their American descendants, the mixed breeds, the Indians, and the half-breeds, without any offense or scandal at so motley a mixture, end quote. The logic driving this perspective underlined not only the importance of slavery to the emergence of capitalism in the 19th century, but also, as Matthew Karp points out in This Vast Southern Empire, the extent to which slave owners and their elected representatives disproportionately shaped U.S. foreign policy. Going back as far as the Haitian Revolution, fear of a successful slave rebellion in the newly formed United States strongly motivated Southern politicians. As Karp mentions, to that end, Presidents Madison and Monroe, quote, used overwhelming force to destroy black maroon settlements in southern Florida, end quote. Fear of slave rebellions also briefly united the interests of American slaveholders and Cuban elites who wanted independence from Spain, but in the late 19th century, after abolition, Roosevelt's forces fought in conjunction with Afro-Cuban armies against their common Spanish foe. The move to wrest Cuba and Puerto Rico from Spain came just as Spain had finally relented to end slavery as a concession to black rebel Cuban armies that had formed to push for independence. In a further move to placate continued unrest on the island, in November 1897, Spain signed automatic charters for Cuba and Puerto Rico, which gave limited home rule governments to both islands. Puerto Rico would gain full representation in the Cortes, the Spanish parliament, and could veto Spanish commercial treaties unfavorable to them while also retaining the rights to set tariffs on imports and exports. In this way, Puerto Ricans were granted a kind of citizenship that allowed self-government, grafted on what was left of their Spanish subjecthood. Yet on July 25, 1898, 8 days after the first meeting of the newly formed Puerto Rican parliament, U.S. troops arrived in the southern port of Guanica and replaced the Spanish flag with the stars and stripes. This date would be remembered over 50 years later when the United States finally followed through on a project to allow Puerto Ricans to have limited autonomy and self-government. But at the time, it was both the end of Teddy Roosevelt's splendid little war and the beginning of the current quandary over what exactly Puerto Rico's new colonial master would do with the island. Although historians agree that there was no pre-existing plan for designating Puerto Rico's status, there was a general belief that Puerto Rico could be incorporated as a U.S. territory and probably would be. This led many to assume that it would follow a similar path to statehood as former territories like Florida and Louisiana. At the very least, it would, by acceding to military control, receive, quote, the advantages and blessings of enlightened civilization, end quote, as Puerto Rico's first military governor, Nelson A. Miles, declared 3 days after the landing of Guanica. Because Cuba was so militarized during its wars for independence, the United States decided to allow it national sovereignty, thinking it could still exert considerable control over the economy because of existing business interests and a ready-made set of Cuban consumers who were already buying Ford Model Ts. But although Puerto Rico had experienced anti-Spanish uprisings in the mid-19th century, in 1898 they did not have nearly the same level of armed mobilization present. So the United States held on to it, particularly because of its geographic location, which would provide the United States with a stronghold on the easternmost tip of the Caribbean. The book is Fantasy Island by Ed Morales.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Christine on Deville. If she rolls into town, she She's smiling wide, but we've all heard the tale of puppies and goats who did not fare well. Now she's coming to Portland, oh what a thrill. Hide all your doodles and keep them still. She'll say howdy y'all with a political twill, but we know that Glenn, it's Christine Nomadeville. Goats beware, cats climb that hill. She's got ranch hand justice and a trigger still. She'll call it farm life. The vibes are chill, like a jazz band ghosting through Capitol Hill. She says she's tough, don't test my will, but mercy's not high on her policy bill. So Portland folks, take this warning still. Don't pet that smile, or Christine Nomadeville. Oh, Christine Nomadeville.
35 minutes past the hour. So the last government shutdown lasted 39 days, as I recall. Maybe it was 35 days, one or the other. And it was brought to an end because a number of control towers just basically shut down. Air traffic controllers were not getting paid. They couldn't make their mortgage payments. A lot of people, these are not, super high paid jobs. And a lot of these people, they're living paycheck to paycheck. And so they just started calling in sick. And, they're forbidden by law from striking. I mean, Reagan took care of that back in 1981 when he destroyed the Air Traffic Controllers Union, PATCO, the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization. They've been replaced by a new kind of Republican acceptable union, but, still. And it's starting again. The Burbank Airport, the Hollywood Burbank Airport, was shut down yesterday. The pilots got a pilot gets in his plane. I mean, there's this article on CNN. It starts out with this story about this guy who's, gets in his plane, fires it up, turns on the radio, and says, "Hey, control tower, I want, and he gets this recorded message back that says the tower is closed due to staffing. And this is, what's happening. In fact, this is from CNN, 12 FAA facilities saw staffing shortages Monday night, last night. The control towers in Burbank, Phoenix, and Denver had so-called staffing triggers. In other words, their staffing got down to the point where they had to start slowing down aircraft traffic, airplane traffic, producing delays across the system because they just didn't have enough controllers to deal with the airplanes. In Newark, New Jersey, Jacksonville, Florida, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Indianapolis, they were also short-staffed, although they didn't have to yet trigger these kinds of actions. The number of controllers calling out sick has increased since the start of the shutdown, according to former reality TV show Sean Duffy, who is now our transportation secretary. Yeah, the shutdown from December 2018 to January 2019 was 35 days long, and it ended when 10 air traffic controllers just said, that's it. That's all it took. And, it was that, and also the TSA guys were calling in sick. And so you were getting these really, really long lines at security. And I'm guessing we're going to see that too. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is talking about getting into heaven? I mean, seriously? Really? Getting into heaven? This is kind of a wild story, frankly. He says, there's no reason to be good except to get into heaven. He says, this is his exact quote. He said, there's no reason to be good. I want to be good because you want to prove to God that you're good, so you go that next step, right? So that's very important to me. I think it's really very important. He's been hanging out lately, particularly during the campaign, with these right-wing Christian pastors who have apparently convinced him that heaven and hell are real. And he's starting to worry. He knows he's lived a life of, violations of the Ten Commandments, shall we say, at the very least. And so he says, last year I came millimeters from death when that bullet pierced through my skin. Yeah, right. Oh, this was an email, fundraising email, but basically he says, he wants to get into heaven. I think that, this is a demonstration of Donald Trump's absolutely transactional approach to everything. He thinks he can cut a deal with God, or at least the God that he's imagining. And that somehow he can just talk God into this the same way he thinks he can talk the Nobel Committee in Norway. A couple of weeks ago, he called the the Prime Minister of Norway to try and talk him into having a good word with the Nobel Committee to give him the Nobel Peace Prize. He thinks he can pull this off with God. I mean, this is how seriously dysfunctional this guy is on the one hand, and also how serious he's thinking about the fact that he's not going to live that much longer, apparently. I mean, look at the what looks like an infusion bruise in the back of his hand that seems to correspond to the 24th of every month when he just goes dark for a day or two. You know, what's with all this stuff? And how sick is he really? Inquiring minds want to know. So what's on your mind today? Speaking of minds, Jared in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hey, Jared, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I just wanted to, along the lines of yesterday and today's topic, interject into the national dialogue. You know, you said we should be encouraging that local elected officials and law enforcement hold ICE and possibly even the military accountable. We definitely should do that, and we should also encourage that they, everybody, you know, film at all times. So we have, evidence.
Documentary record.
And then, documentary record. And then when we see a crime, especially when there's masked agents, that, you know, law enforcement take up charges and include conspiracy. Yeah. Because conspiracy to, you know, cover up a crime is a crime in itself. So then the superior officers and whatnot would be also dragged into a court case that would, you know, quiet down some of this illegal activity.
Yeah, in theory, anyway. The question is, would they take the defeat and go away, or would they double down and try to start a civil war? I think they'll do the latter. I think Trump wants a civil war. He wants Americans killing each other, in my opinion.
I agree.
The rhetoric he's using, you know, against judges and everybody else. He wants murder.
I fully agree, but I do see that using, you know, the legal means is you know, in the eyes of other people, at least the American public, it's a fundamental bedrock.
Oh, taking on Trump has to be done entirely within the law. Absolutely.
Right. And so if they're using the law to break the law, you know, it becomes a conundrum in itself, and then it breaks down the moral, you know, fabric of our, you know, society.
Yeah, but just consider this scenario. I mean, you know, let's say in California right now, it's illegal for ICE to be masked. It's against the law.
Right.
And yet they're still doing it. So let's say that Gavin Newsom goes in and he arrests a couple of ICE officers. And then Trump comes in and says, you can't do that. And he orders the rest of the ICE people to turn their guns on the Los Angeles police or on the California Highway Patrol police. And then
that would be a law. That would be breaking law in itself.
But then you've got basically the federal government at war, physical war, shooting war, with a state government. And that's kind of the definition of a civil war.
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, that would open up enough people's eyes, like, you know, court justices to stop it. You know, I mean, hopefully.
I don't know. I think Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas would be cheering Trump on.
Yeah, it's sad that they, you know, have no recognition of the Constitution.
This is how close we are to something that could be extraordinarily destructive to this country. It could be the end of our 250-year experiment. Jared, thanks for the call. Right. Thanks for thought-provoking stuff. Thank you. Tom in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Hey, it's been bugging me, that whole thing with Kristi Noem using the bathroom in Chicago. Mm-hmm. That thing was as phony and staged as anything you could imagine. It was like out of Pravda or North Korea with Dear Leader. I mean, who takes a film crew, a guy being a narrator, someone being a reporter, and an entourage when you're stopping to use a bathroom?
Kristi Noem does.
I mean, yeah, that they knew the answer to that was going to be no.
It's the old Ted Cruz joke. You know, the most dangerous place in America is between a camera crew and Kristi Noem.
Yeah, the whole thing was as phony as can be. I mean,
well, expect her to do some kind of stunt like that here today in Portland as well. She's looking. They're looking for confrontation. They're trying to gin up conflict.
Yeah, the thing was that it was produced by a guy called Benny Johnson, and he's with Breitbart and
I know.
Tucker Carlson and all this right-wing stuff. And it irritates me that it got played on conservative media about, oh, poor Kristi Noem was denied things because by Pritzker.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Like, she blamed the governor for not being able to use a restroom in a building in Chicago.
Right. In a closed building.
How bizarre is that?
Yeah. No, it's fascists have to play victim. It's the key. I mean, Mein Kampf, the entire book was, we're such victims of the Jews, of the communists, of the immigrants, principally the Roma. They've got to be, they have to be victims. And so Kristi Noem, she's going to come to town. She's going to figure out some way to be, a pathetic victim or, the giant overlord.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to get tough on Portland here, yeah. Got any puppies? We'll be right back. Welcome back, Aaron in Richmond, Virginia. Hey, Aaron, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Hold up. Let me take you off.
No, I can hear you just fine, Aaron. It's fine. What's up?
Thanks for taking my call. So I think right now we're in a post-fact or post-truth era of politics, and we have been ever since Trump entered the political arena in 2016. Mm-hmm. More and more people are departing from a common understanding of reality as it unfolds on a daily basis, and we've got chaos actors like Steve Bannon and Trump that flood the zone with lies. And so techniques from the old paradigm, like fact-checking and debates, they no longer influence people to reach the critical mass that we need. And I think persuasion is a dead strategy.
So what's your alternative, Aaron?
Politic of inspiration over persuasion. So I'm wondering, how do we inspire people to get involved in a post-fact era of politics?
Well, it's your hypothesis, so I will ask you to give me an example of what you're talking about.
Well, like every election, the largest cohort of people are eligible voters who don't vote for whatever reason. People that just sit on the couch. I don't think that persuading them is going to get them up off the couch. I think they need to be inspired.
So give me an example of how you'd inspire them.
Well, I think it comes from showing that what we have to offer on the progressive side of things is much more compelling, humane, and dignified than what Republicans have.
Kamala Harris tried that. She was going to give people $50,000 to start a business. She was going to give homeowners $20,000 for a down payment on their mortgage. First-time home buyers. She was going to, eliminate student debt. I mean, there was a lot of good kind of progressive stuff that she was throwing around, and she was going to continue the Biden policies of, promoting green construction across the country and all these other things. And, the voters said, no, we'll take Trump.
Yeah, she also alienated a lot of people that would have voted for her by refusing to take a moral stance on the issue of Gaza.
I think you're right. I think that hurt her badly, and it hurt Joe Biden badly. Whether it was decisive or not, I don't know. It may well have been. I think the bigger thing was that in Pennsylvania, Elon Musk went in and spent millions and millions of dollars, and if, all these. You had 145 right-wing billionaire families supporting Trump. I mean, just pouring money into social media, into television, into radio. They just dominated the airwaves.
All right, so there's one more thing I wanted to say. I live in Virginia, and we have a big election coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah.
There has been an influx of something that's called pink journalism.
You mean pink slime?
For those of you that don't know.
Journalism?
Yeah, pink slime journalism, yes. It's when an outlet pretends to be a local source, but really they just spread partisan propaganda.
Right.
A lot of stories come from AI. It's coming in people's mail. It's helping the GOP.
They've been doing this for years.
Lies.
They've turned it into an art form, and they've got AI now producing most of the content, so it's real easy for them to crank this stuff out cheaply. It's amazing, Aaron. Are you getting it? Are you getting it in email?
I'm seeing it mainly online. Facebook is like the worst place.
Yeah. Well, Facebook, they altered their algorithm apparently to promote right-wing content, or at least promote hateful content. Aaron, thank you for the call. Good stuff. 49 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. A lot of people wonder, where did this whole right-wing movement to basically gut our freedoms and end DEI and all this other, where did this all begin? It all started back in 1951 with a book called The Conservative Mind, From Burke to Eliot by Russell Kirk. And he argued that if the middle class ever got too big, you'd see young people and women and racial minorities all get up on their hind feet and start protesting and basically screwing up America. And in the 50s, even Republicans thought he was nuts. But then the 60s happened and all those protests, and suddenly Republicans thought, yeah, he's right. We've got to destroy the middle class, or at least cut it back. And that was Reagan's mandate when he came into office in 1981. There's a whole article about this. You can read all the details. It's titled The GOP's 60-Year Conspiracy to Kill Our Democracy. None dare call it treason, but I will. Over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Cliff in Santa Clarita. Hey, Cliff, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. Hey, I'm wondering if you're getting enough sleep, brother.
Why is that?
Doing your show, doing other people's shows, reading books, writing books,
Yeah,
hope you're getting enough sleep.
I'm doing good, Cliff. I'm doing fine.
Okay. All right, two things real quick, Tom. Who's keeping track of all this reckless spending? Is anybody keeping track? Because I never hear about it in the news.
Which particular reckless spending are you talking about?
How much are they running up our national debt? He's spending just billions and trillions everywhere. Between his first term
Trump
and
added
this term,
$7 trillion to the national debt in his last term, and he'll probably add that much this time.
Right. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's totally insane and unsustainable.
Yep.
Nobody talks about it in the news.
Well, I've been ranting about this ever since I started the show 23 years ago, Cliff. I've been going on and on about this. This is the two Santa Claus strategy.
I've been listening.
When you've got Republicans in office, you give massive tax cuts and you run up the debt as fast and as far as you can. And when a Democrat comes into office, you yell and scream about the national debt and force them to cut spending. Yeah. I mean, it's just this is a scheme that they have been. This is a con, a huge con that the GOP has been running since 1981. When Ronald Reagan was sworn into office, our national debt was not even $1 trillion. It had gone from 130% of GDP at the end of World War II down to virtually nothing. And Reagan started this two Santa Claus scam, and by the end of 8 years of Reagan, the national debt was $2.7 trillion. He started it, with these massive tax cuts for billionaires.
There's no end in sight the way they're going. No. And one more thing, Tom, this widespread corruption that's everywhere in this administration, having lobbyists from big agriculture being installed at the EPA. They're still trying to debate whether Roundup, glyphosate, they're still trying to debate whether it's cancer causing or carcinogenic, which we all know it is after years and years of all the information.
Well, there's been lawsuits. There's a massive class action lawsuit against them for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Bob Kennedy, he came into office saying he was going to do something about glyphosate and all this other stuff and all these pesticides. And then he publishes this report, 3 weeks ago, I think it was, that says, well, we're just going to have to think about this for a couple of years because, the lobbyists are giving a lot of money to the Republicans. Cliff, thanks for the call. Spot on. Thank you. Ann in Trinity, Florida. Hey, Ann, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thank you very much for taking my call. I was calling because kind of from what you were saying at the start of the program, and Republicans repeatedly claiming that Dems are soft on crime and support criminals. And I've kind of got two examples. One would be Scott Jenkins. He was a sheriff in a very small town that, as the world is very small, I lived in growing up during elementary school. And he was a sheriff from 2012 to 2023. He was indicted in June of 2023 for conspiracy, honest services, mail and wire fraud, and bribery. After taking $75,000 in bribes and giving some auxiliary deputies sheriff's badges.
Wow.
And prior to him, so he was sentenced to 10 years, and he was supposed to start serving in May, and of course Trump taking office prior to that. Before he stepped in to serve any of his sentence, Trump pardoned him.
Of course.
My other example would be that...
Any idea how much money he gave to Trump in exchange for that pardon?
I don't know, but I do know that he appeared at a White House event in 2018.
Yeah, him and Rudy were selling those pardons for $2 million a pop back in the day. Or at least that's what Rudy claimed.
I don't know that this guy from Culpeper would have that kind of funds, but again, he's law enforcement and he's willing to give random people badges.
Yeah.
And then the other example that I would give would be that back in November, we had a choice between an adjudicated rapist and a 34-time felon who was out on bail for other felonies versus a prosecutor who puts rapists, felons, and pedophiles in jail. We chose one, they chose the other. And so at this point, it really should be, which of our laws is Trump not breaking?
That's a good question. That's a good question. And thank you. That was great. Rennie in Long Beach, California. Hey, Rennie, what's up?
Oh, not much, Tom. I'm really appreciate talking to you. I want to let your listeners know that Medicare, regular Medicare, is still on the website, but it's difficult to find. When I was trying to find it, it only had, when it said plans, it only had Medicare Advantage plans, and that's it. Didn't give you a choice.
Really?
And so, just like you said in the past. But if you scroll through all the Medicare Advantage plans, which is about 8 pages worth, the very last entry is titled Original Medicare.
Wow.
And that's the one you want.
Wow. You know, Dr. Oz, the guy who's in charge of this now, he's in charge of Medicare, has a long history of shilling for Medicare Advantage programs. So one wonders, whose palms are being greased here. Rennie, thanks for the heads up on that. I had no idea. That's mind-boggling. And it's got to be really tough for people who are just, turning 65 and not, well educated and not well informed about all this. Rennie, thank you. That was brilliant. Stick around. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. In the weeks after 9/11, Rodale Press reached out to a bunch of folks, me, the Dalai Lama, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Rabbi David Wolpe, Thich Nhat Hanh, Chuck Colson, Neil Donald Walsh, and asked for thoughts about a spiritual response to the attack on America. The result was a book, From the Ashes. And this is from the chapter that I wrote, The Goddess of Democracy, a Sacred Archetype to Heal the World. People argue that the terrorist attacks against the United States reflect a war between one religion and another, or between the poor and rich of the world. While there may be an element of truth to each, I'd suggest that the real war here is between the 11th century and the 21st century. And while our leaders, and until our leaders figure that out, we may miss some great opportunities. Back in the Dark and Middle Ages, the Catholic Church ruled Europe. Women were often forbidden to go out in public unless properly covered, and were explicitly the property of men. Justice was swift and severe, ranging from disfigurement to torture to death in horrific ways, and most often meted out with the approval or supervision of clerics. The power behind the power of all the royal families of Europe was the Pope. On November 27th, 1095, Pope Urban gave one of history's most famous speeches to the Council of Clermont in France, calling for a holy war against Islam to unite factious Europe. Dr. E.L. Skip Knox of Boise State University in Idaho summarized the Pope's speech. The noble race of Franks must come to the aid of their fellow Christians in the East. The infidel Turks are advancing into the heart of Eastern Christendom. Christians are being oppressed and attacked. Churches and holy places are being defiled. Jerusalem is groaning under the Saracen yoke. The Holy Sepulchre is in Muslim hands and has been turned into a mosque. The Franks must stop their internal wars and squabbles. Let them go instead against the infidel and fight a righteous war. God himself will lead them, for they will be doing his work. There will be absolution and remission of sins for all who die in the service of Christ. Here they are poor and miserable sinners. There they will be rich and happy. Let none hesitate. They must march next summer. God wills it. Thus began a war between two different medieval cultures, 11th century Catholic and 11th century Muslim. Over the next few centuries, the Catholics, with their battle cry of Deus Vult, God wills it, were often victorious against the Muslims, whose only crime defined by the Pope was that they were living in the Holy Land of the Catholic Church. Medieval historian Raymond of Aguilles wrote the following eyewitness account of the attack and seizure of Jerusalem in 1099 by the triumphant Christian crusaders. Quote, some of our men cut off the heads of their enemies. Others shot them with arrows so they fell from the towers. Others tortured them longer by casting them into the flames. Piles of heads, hand, and feet were to be seen in the streets of the city. It was necessary to pick one's way over the bodies of men and horses. But these were small matters compared to what happened at the Temple of Solomon, a place where religious services were ordinarily chanted. What happened there? If I tell the truth, it will exceed your powers of belief. So let it suffice to say, this much at least, that in the temple and portico of Solomon, men rode in blood up to their knees and bridle reins. End of quote. In the 900 or so years since the early Crusades, both Christianity and Islam have undergone profound changes. The Protestant Reformation shook Christianity to its core, and the Renaissance in Europe wrought huge transformations in both Christianity and Judaism. Perhaps the most critical change came about in the 18th century when Jefferson, Madison, Franklin, and others synthesized the highest ideals of Greek, Roman, and Iroquois thought and culture to create the United States of America. In doing that, they ignited the flame of liberty, bringing into the world an archetype that to this day inspires hope worldwide. As America grew and our ideas of Republican democracy spread around the world, further transformations of the world took place. Another turning point was when modern science challenged the medieval worldview of the church in the Scopes monkey trial of 1925. Although Clarence Darrow lost that case, its widespread publicity began a dramatic and lasting process of change across the world. The American dream is a powerful and pervasive force in the world, even if the sometimes imperialistic behavior of our transnational corporations is often at odds with our own ideals. That dream has wafted over the entire world and is still so powerful that people are willing to die for it. In China, the Tiananmen Square protesters marched to their doom in 1989, carrying a 37-foot-tall papier-mâché replica of the Statue of Liberty, which they had renamed the Goddess of Democracy. Of course, there are still pockets of medieval perspective in the Christian world. The post-disaster comments of Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, who have said they had just witnessed the wrath of their God, who had lifted the veil and allowed the terrorists to act because of their God's anger over homosexuals, liberals, and the ACLU, reveals that such a worldview is still alive and well in a small fringe of Christianity. Some Christians are still today willing to commit terrorist acts of murder or mass murder. Timothy McVeigh and those who murdered numerous abortion providers all claim their acts are grounded in Christianity and biblical teachings. And just as 21st century Christianity still has its own pockets of medieval worldview, so does 21st century Islam. And then it gets into, how these reformations happen and, what we hope to see in among those right-wing crazies in Islam. The book is From the Ashes, a spiritual response to the attack on America.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome back to the second hour of our program. Just a heads up, I'll be in Los Angeles on October 18th, on No King's Day, actually. Also, on Saturday, October 18th, Free Speech TV is going to be, basically sharing, reporting live, apparently, from King's Day, No King's Day protests around the country. So check that out. Also on the 17th, the day before, I'll be in San Diego with Greg Palast on that book tour. So interesting stuff coming up. Yeah, you can get information about the LA one at kpfk.org, the San Diego one at news.knsj.org, and you got to sign up for both of them in advance. All right, impeachable. Donald Trump spoke to the Navy, as part of the celebration of the 250th birthday of the Navy and of America and all this kind of stuff. And he had this cheering group of sailors, SEALs, and Marines. And again, amplifying this idea that Donald Trump wants our military to go to war against Americans, against specifically Democrats. This is the kind of stuff that creates civil wars when leaders talk like this. And, particularly, and even worse, when you start comparing people to animals or insects, the Rwandan genocide, they're cockroaches. So Trump says we have to take care of this little gnat that's on our shoulder called the Democrats. He says this to a group of soldiers who are, people who've been trained to kill people. And he gets a cheer for it. And he said they want to give all our money to illegal aliens that pour into the country, and they get applause. Senior policy lecturer and faculty director on the Homeland Security Project and the Security and Global Health Project at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, Juliet Kamen, says this is not subtle. This weekend, the ground has shifted, and no person can deny what the president, unpopular and unfit, intends. To remain silent is to welcome this. They can both sides or claim they didn't hear, but there's no wiggle room about his plans now. Paul Rykoff says there are lines that should never be crossed and have never been crossed, but he keeps crossing them. Rykoff added, never let them normalize how wrong it is to attack political opponents when speaking to a military audience. And again, the military audience, these are people who are trained to blow things up and kill people. And you're telling them that your political opponents are gnats, are insects? Yasmin Ansari, a U.S. congressperson from Arizona, said, this is how authoritarians consolidate power. Yeah. Meanwhile, there's this MAGA influencer. He was traveling with Kristi Noem apparently in Chicago when she wanted to use the bathroom. I'm not going to put his name out there because he's doing this stuff because he wants his name out there. But he's posting AI-generated videos on social media now portraying himself as Batman, punching out people in sombreros. Like racist much? Eric Swalwell, the Democratic congressman from California, says he's cosplaying a Border Patrol agent. He followed this up his time in Chicago with an AI-generated video portraying himself as Batman. Yeah, I just told you that. This is there's a whole bunch of people on Twitter who are just going nuts about this. You know, what Benny Johnson released is vile. There's nothing funny, edgy, or political about digitally creating or promoting a video of yourself beating up immigrants, including a woman. He beats up a woman in this thing. It's depraved propaganda, pure and simple. Another one says, it's been 2 weeks since this guy demanded accountability from left-wing commentators for fueling violence and inciting attacks. You know, he's talking about Charlie Kirk. And he says, but I'm sure an AI video of him joyfully beating up caricatures of various unnamed immigrants is a completely different kind of problem. Now, the GOP has a racism problem, and these GOP influencers are out there basically just promoting this stuff. This is wild. This is wrong. It's just plain old flat out wrong. And we need to be calling it out. Meanwhile, a judge in South Carolina, Donald Trump has said every state has to send him all of their election files. And he's going to have a bunch of right-wing crazies go through these files looking for what he says is election fraud. And so a judge stopped that. She blocked it. And what happens? A couple days later, her home blows up. Now, and Stephen Miller calls her a so-called judge. Far-left Democrat judges. It's Stephen Miller. There is a large and growing movement of left-wing terrorism in this country. It's well organized and funded and is shielded by far-left Democrat judges. As this judge that has been criticized by Trump and that blocked, this effort, as her home blows up and catches on fire, her husband had to crawl out of a second-floor window. He's in the hospital. Her kids injured, fleeing this fire. She was out running at the time. It was apparently, very early in the morning or late or whatever. Here we have now, Judge James Robart. Trump called him a so-called judge and criticized him. He got a flood of threats. Judge Curiel, remember him? Trump said he had Mexican heritage. He was getting death threats. Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart, this was in 2022 after he signed the Mar-a-Lago search warrant. He got hit with anti-Semitic death threats. Judge Tanya Chutkin, she was on his federal election case. Her home was swatted. Judge Arthur Engoron, after Trump targeted his law clerk, the court was inundated with threats. His home got a bomb threat during the trial. Judge Merchan, who oversaw Trump's Manhattan criminal case, after Trump attacked his family, prosecutors warned of a real risk to the proceedings. Judge Royce Lamberth, a Reagan appointee, said he'd been hit with an unprecedented wave of harassment and threats following ruling against Trump. And it goes on and on. I mean, the people that Trump has named, not just judges. I mean, Ilhan Omar, Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney, Peter Mayer, Rusty Bowers, they've all received death threats and, these kind of things. And this judge, whose house blew up, Diane Goodstein is her name, after she blocked this, Trump's Civil Rights Division chief, Harmeet Dillon, posted to X that the Justice Department, quote, will not stand by for a state court judge's hasty nullification of our federal voting laws. And according to Matthew Chapman over on Raw Story or on Common Dreams, that's when the fury started coming in. One account, boasting over 11,000 followers, proclaimed, rain holy hellfire onto these judges who interfere with the executive branch. Another said, Diane S. Goodstein, may all your evil wishes and evil deeds directed toward Trump and the MAGA boomerang back and stick to you and yours 1,000-fold. Amen. I mean, 3 people, including your husband, had to be rushed to the hospital with severe injuries. State law enforcement is investigating this as a possible arson. Now, we don't know yet, but Dan Goldman is out there trading barbs with Stephen Miller about this. Keep an eye on it. We'll see, what's going on here, if this actually is arson, if this is, more MAGA-inspired violence. So what's on your mind? I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. It's 15 minutes past the hour here on the True People's Media, Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is interesting. Tom Tillis is pushing back on Pam Bondi and Donald Trump with their troops in Portland and Chicago. Of course, he's not running for re-election, so he's free. And welcome back. Paul in Ambler, Pennsylvania. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I wanted to report on a scandal that's blowing up in the Philadelphia region. The Republican township supervisor, Nick Fountain of Skippack, Pennsylvania, was being arraigned for extradition to the state of Maryland for child pornography solicitation and solicitation of a child, when in walked a young man who basically charged that supervisor, Nick Fountain, with raping him and molesting him from the time he was 9 years old until he was 16. At which point, Nick Fountain confessed to that. Now he has 2 states investigating him for child sex solicitation under the age of 13. Now, the man is a Republican, an elected official for many years, tried to get, or not tried, but was setting himself up to become a state senator in Pennsylvania. In addition to that, his father is on the school board, the local school board. Wow. And the family operates 2 child care businesses, one for a camp and one for daycare.
Holy cow. I'm assuming that this guy, his political aspirations are dead now, or are the Republicans still embracing him?
Well, no, I don't know. This has just been happening like in the last 48 hours. At the beginning of the month, it was he was going to Maryland from some sort of state trooper investigation. But now this young man walks in, describes what happened to him, and the township supervisor, the Republican, confesses, yeah, I did do that. Wow. So I can't imagine, even if he's found innocent, anyone's going to have anything to do with him. Yeah. But here's the thing. Every week, and sometimes every night of every week, when I watch the local news, there is some kind of sex scandal with children. I mean, it could be a black storefront minister. It could be a Catholic priest. It could be the male. I mean, it could be just about anybody's youth, sports coach, YM. Take your pick. Sometimes, it's literally every night. And they're what we would call a nobody. They're not elected officials. They're somewhat prominent. But this is so widespread. Your listeners must be hearing exactly what I'm hearing locally, because this is not going to be broadcast.
No, I see these kind of stories in the Oregonian, at least 2 or 3 times a week.
And all these
cop
people
is indicted, or a teacher.
Interconnected.
Yeah.
Who was the Speaker of the House? Hastert.
Yeah, Hastert.
Okay?
Yeah.
They didn't vet him. They didn't know his past. There's something going on.
No, he's in prison now for that. And then you got Jim Jordan covering up the stuff at the Ohio State University.
Penn State, the president of Penn State University, because of the football scandal there about 10 years ago when Josh Shapiro was the Attorney
So
General.
Paul, I'm just about out of time. What's your point here?
I think all your listeners should start focusing on this. The Epstein files is the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about major interrelated Republican Party members on a local and state level who are either compromised or they're willfully joining the Republican Party so they can have a big sex orgy.
I get it. Paul, thanks for the call. Holy cow. 20 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com.
Born in a mansion of winners and losers, kindness was weakness, shame never shown. Roy Cohn whispered, attack and destroy, a gilded facade built on failure alone. The hunger for power, the need for control, a perfect machine for a heart without soul. The last American president. Is this how the story ends? Democracy breaking, the truth forsaken. We rise or we descend. Reform, resist, remember. The call is heaven sent. Or we'll write the history books of the last American president. Decades in motion, the billionaires plan. Nixon to Reagan, the courts in their
21
hands.
minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Bob in Melbourne, Florida. Hey, Bob. Thanks for listening to WMNF. What's up?
Always best little radio station on planet Earth. Hey, faithfully executing the laws. I think Donald Trump, I don't think he's doing that, because when you execute something, shouldn't you get a blindfold and your last cigarette or something?
Yeah, the word has changed meaning over the years.
I guess so. Hey, serious note. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I think I've said that before, but decorated, Bronze Star, Army Commendation, spent a little time on a DMZ. My father, here's some background. My father was a sergeant major in the Marine Corps. He was the third highest, when he retired, he was the third highest ranking enlisted man in the armed forces.
Wow.
Veteran of Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima.
Holy cow.
One of the few Marines that walked out of the Chosin Reservoir in Korean War, stuff like that. He was professor of military history at USC for a while. He used to tell me, don't worry about anybody taking over America. Don't worry about a dictatorship in America. And the reason is because the last wall of defense is going to be the chiefs of staff. They will not allow it to happen.
And yet you had soldiers, sailors, and Marines cheering Donald Trump as he was saying the Democrats are gnats.
I was just getting to that because, honest to God, I'm afraid. I am afraid right now that what my father told me is not true.
Yeah.
That the last line of defense is not going to be the chiefs of staff. I don't think that we can count on them, and considering the way that Trump is using the military right now, I totally worry for our country. I do. Yeah. I'm worried that this is not. I was just wondering what your thoughts on the subject on that.
I've made my thoughts clearer. I am very concerned that Trump is going to great lengths to radicalize the military and to get them on his side. And I've been saying for years and years, Charlie Rangel used to come on this program all the time before he died, senator from Harlem, or the congressman, and pointing out that this is one of the reasons why countries have drafts. It's not just to provide cannon fodder during time of war. It's so that you've got diversity in the military.
That's right. The one thing that brought the Vietnam war to an end was because we had a draft.
It was the draft, yeah, absolutely. If it had been an all-volunteer force, they would have been, hey, you know, another war to fight. You know, we get extra pay when we fight wars.
Exactly. And being a Vietnam veteran myself, when I got back from Vietnam, I saw what a joke Vietnam was, and I was one of those guys out there in the street saying no.
Yeah, and Iraq and Afghanistan lasted longer than Vietnam did. Why? Because you had an all-volunteer military. There was no protest.
Exactly. A professional army. Well, damn. Think about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, not a good thing.
It'd be like saying right.
Not a good thing.
Tell a pro baseball player that they ain't going to be no game tonight.
Yeah, no, I got it. Bob, I got to move along, but you made your point so very, very well. Thank you so much for the call. Stephen in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Stephen, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I have a question about the Trump administration wanting to prosecute Comey.
Mm-hmm.
Would Comey's lawyers, if he used some good lawyers, could they demand the Mueller report unredacted in order to be to offer confidence to the case?
Oh, what a great question. I don't know, but what an opportunity. I mean, we all still want to see the unredacted Mueller report. Obviously, it's destructive to Donald Trump, or Bill Barr wouldn't have blacked out so much of it. Mueller wrote it specifically to be made public. I mean, it was intention. The intention of it was to be made public, and it was vetted by the lawyers at the DOJ to make it public.
Yeah, it's like we're a third world country and we can't get information anymore about anything, whether it's absentee or anything else.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, and a variation on that, I mean, they blacked out the Mueller report, which showed that there was collusion between the Russians and Donald Trump and his campaign. And in fact, I believe it was 10 people were indicted, as a result of that report, many of them Russians. So it was serious stuff. And now they've got, according to the news reports, Pam Bondi's got 1,000 FBI agents, or Kash Patel has 1,000 FBI agents out there with, black felt pens marking, covering up every single mention of Donald Trump and all the Epstein files. So when they finally do drag them out of the DOJ, there's going to be nothing to see. I mean, it's like, holy cow.
We're going down the toilet.
Yeah.
We're going down the toilet, Tom.
Oh, we are in so much trouble in this country right now because of these criminals. Stephen, thank you so much for the call. It's crazy. 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
27 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Lords of Easy Money, How the Federal Reserve Broke the American Economy by Christopher Leonard. Now, this is from Chapter 1. It's titled Going Below Zero, and it begins our story in 2010. Thomas Hoenig, H-O-E-N-I-G, woke up early on November 3rd, 2010, knowing what he had to do that day and also knowing that he was almost certainly going to fail. He was going to cast a vote, and he was going to vote no. He was going to dissent, and he knew that this dissent would probably define his legacy. Hoenig was trying to stop something, a public policy that he believed could very well turn into a catastrophe. He believed it was his duty to do so, but the wheels were already turning to make this policy a reality, and the wheels were far more powerful than he was. The wheels were powered by the big banks on Wall Street, the stock market, and the leadership of America's Federal Reserve Bank. Everyone knew that Hoenig was going to lose that day, but he was going to vote no anyway. Hoenig was 64 years old, and he was the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, a position that gave him extraordinary power over America's economic affairs. He was in Washington that morning because he sat on the Federal Reserve's powerful policymaking committee, which met every 6 weeks to effectively determine the value and quantity of American money. Most people in America don't think very much about money, meaning the actual currency, that thing we call the dollar. The word dollar is, in fact, a slang term for American currency, which is actually called a Federal Reserve note. People spend Federal Reserve notes every day if they're lucky enough to have them, but they rarely think about the complex, largely invisible system that makes money appear out of thin air. This system is the U.S. Federal Reserve System. The Fed, America's central bank, is the only institution on earth that can create U.S. dollars at will. Because he was a senior official at the Federal Reserve, Thomas Honig had to think about money all the time. He thought about it in the same way that a very stressed-out building superintendent might think about plumbing and heating. Honig had to think about money as a system to be managed, and to be managed just right. When you ran the system that created money, you had to do your job carefully, with prudence and integrity, or else terrible things might happen. The building might flood or catch fire. This is why Honig felt so much pressure when he woke up that November morning in Washington, D.C. He was staying at a very nice hotel called the Fairmont, where he always stayed when he traveled from his home in Kansas City to the nation's capital. Honig was in town for the regular meeting of the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC for short. When the committee met in Washington, its members voted and set the course of the Fed's actions. There were 12 members on the committee, which was run by the powerful chairman of the Federal Reserve. For a year now, Honig had been voting no. If you tallied his votes during 2010, they would read no, 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 and no. His dissents had become expected, but they were also startling if you consider Thom Honig's character. He wasn't by nature anything close to a dissident. He was a rule follower. He was born and raised in a small town where he started working at the family plumbing shop before he was 10 years old. He served as an artilleryman in Vietnam, and when he came home, he didn't protest against the war. Instead, he studied economics and banking at Iowa State, earning a PhD. His first job out of school was as an economist with the Federal Reserve Regional Bank in Kansas City in the supervision department. At the Fed, he went from being a rule follower to being a rule enforcer. Honig rose through the ranks to become president of the Kansas City Fed in 1991. This was the job he still held in 2010. His responsibilities as one of 12 regional Fed Bank presidents illuminate the structure of America's money system. The Federal Reserve is like any other in the world. It is a crazy genetic mashup of different animals, part private bank and part government agency. People talk about the Fed as if it were a bank, but it is really a network of regional banks, all controlled by a central office in Washington, D.C. Honig had all the fiery disposition that one might expect from a regional Fed president, which is to say none at all. He was soft-spoken, civil, wore cufflinks and pinstripe suits, and spent his days talking about things like capital requirements and interest rates. Honig was an institutionalist and a conservative with the little c sense of the word. And yet here he was, in late 2010, a dissident. After he woke up in his hotel room, Honig had some time alone before the big day started. He gathered his thoughts. He shaved, put on a suit, knotted his tie, and gathered his papers. If he had any doubts about what he was going to do that day, he didn't advertise them. He had spent months, years, even decades preparing for this action. This vote would reflect everything he'd learned during his career at the Fed. He was trying to apply what he knew to help the Federal Reserve navigate through extraordinary times. The American financial system had broken in late 2008 after the investment bank Lehman Brothers collapsed. That moment marked a threshold for people like Thom Honig. Economists and central bankers described the ensuing panic as the global financial crisis, eventually bestowing the moment with its own biblical label, the GFC. The world of central banking was neatly divided into two eras. There was the world pre-GFC and the world post-GFC. The GFC itself was apocalyptic. The entire financial system experienced a total collapse that risked creating another Great Depression. The book, The Lords of Easy Money by Christopher Leonard, the subtitle, How the Federal Reserve Broke the American Economy. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. So have you noticed that the Republicans are pretty much not talking about a constitutional convention anymore? They used to be gung-ho to rewrite the Constitution. You know, they wanted to put corporate personhood in there. They wanted to change it so that women can't vote. They wanted to do away with the election of senators, repeal the 17th Amendment, take us back to them being appointed by the states. They had all these weird, they wanted to outlaw labor unions, all these weird ideas, but they've stopped talking about it. I mean, they're still moving forward on it, but it's not. Project 2025, for example, you know, their ultimate talking document, does not have one single mention in it about a constitutional convention. Why would that be? Well, it's because the Supreme Court is doing their work for them. I mean, you know, they have overturned Article 2. They've overturned the 1st, 4th, 9th, and 14th Amendments. They've overturned Article 1, Section 7. All the details of this whole thing are over at HartmannReport.com. You got to check it out.
The sky was calm, the streets were still, but he cried out for war from the Capitol Hill. No riot, no fire, no threat in the air. Just a man with a crown and a vacant stare. He sent the soldiers into our towns, said he'd save us all as he tore things down. The sirens screamed what the headlines missed. Another freedom erased with a clenched white fist. We're standing on the edge of the authoritarian cliff, with flags in our hands and truth adrift. Hungary fell and Russia too, and now the mirror shows a red, white, blue. So raise your voice before it slips, before we tumble from the authoritarian cliff.
36 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Tom in Media, Pennsylvania. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Yeah, I agree. I think that the air traffic controllers not being paid is definitely going to just destroy the service that we're going to have on our airlines. You know, these guys are very highly skilled, and they do make enough money they can afford a few days off. And I think that they're kind of disgruntled over the last few years over their working conditions, and they would like, you know, nothing better than to show how important and vital they are. And this, coupled with the fact that our airlines are so budget conscious, they don't have the elasticity to make up for this cascading problem we're going to have with the towers, is going to do a couple things, Tom. First of all, you know, the middle class is 51% population. This is going to really, really influence the middle class. It's going to inconvenience them, and, you know, even making plans for Thanksgiving travel, business, pleasure. And this is going to cause immense pressure, I think, on these moderate Democrat senators, where this is going to be such an existential problem to the middle class that
there's three possibilities here, Tom. One is that the Democrats cave in, like John Fetterman and Catherine Cortez Masto have already done. Yeah. The second is that the Republicans cave in. You know, John Thune, all he has to do is put forward a resolution that the Senate rules are being changed to allow the passage of this one continuing resolution. And he can do that with 50 votes plus the vice president. And he's got 53 votes plus the vice president. And that allows them to break the Democratic filibuster and simply pass their continuing resolution. They don't need a single Democratic vote. The Republicans can do this all by themselves. Or the third option is that neither one of those things happen, and the shutdown continues, and our air traffic control system starts to fall apart, and Trump declares that this is a state of emergency and throws the country into martial law.
Yeah, well, what's going to happen realistically, Tom, is The Republicans are just going to every 3 or 4 days vote to put this country back for the safety of our passengers and for our economy. And eventually, there's going to be so much pressure on these Democratic senators. And it's also
why
going
the
to
Democrats?
Give them the
John
cover.
Thune can do this all by himself, Tom.
Well, already 52 Republicans are already voting to put us back in. Why should they?
I know. They don't need the Democrats. They've got 52 votes. All they have to do is the same thing that the Democrats tried to do on January 19th, 2022, when we tried to pass the Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act, which, by the way, would have prevented Donald Trump from getting elected because it would have ended dark money in our elections. But, they with 50 votes, they could have stopped the Republican filibuster. They lacked the votes of Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, so they only had 48. They couldn't pull it off. But the Democrats tried to get around the filibuster by simply changing the Senate rules for one single piece of legislation, or actually 2 pieces of legislation. The Republicans can do the exact same thing. They do it routinely. Republicans routinely, John Thune is routinely blocking Democratic filibusters and installing federal judges, and he's routinely getting around Democratic filibusters by suspending the Senate rules to put into place people like Stephen Miller. The Trump's appointees. Most of Trump's appointees would not have passed if John Thune hadn't broken the filibuster. Pam Bondi wouldn't be sitting as our Attorney General if John Thune hadn't broken the Democratic filibuster. Kash Patel would not be FBI director if John Thune, the head of the Senate, the leader, the Senate Majority Leader, hadn't broken the filibuster, or maybe it was Mitch McConnell. I'm pretty sure it was Thune who did it. So bottom line, the Republicans control this, Tom. This is entirely up to them. So the question is, will they be shamed into backing down?
No, Tom, that's absolutely false. It's in the Democrats' court. They are the ones shutting down the government.
They're not,
over
Tom.
Changes in health care.
They are not.
Yes, they are.
No, they are not.
Then how come all the Republicans are voting to keep the government open?
It's a performance. It's a show. All they have to do is vote to suspend the Senate rules. Tom, understand this.
Though. The Democrats will cave, Tom. The Democrats will cave.
I hope not.
Mark my words.
Yeah, I hope you're wrong, Tom.
There's
but
no reason for Thune to do this. He doesn't want to be another Harry Reid.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll
but
see.
I think I'm right. I'll tell. We'll see. You could be right, but I think I am, Tom.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for taking the call.
Time will tell. Good talking to you, Tom. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I agree with you. The Democrats should stand strong, but let's be real here. Let's be realists. Are the MAGAs Nazi brown shirts? Are ICE and the Klan and Nazis all Nazis? I mean, is this Germany? Are we really where Germany was in 1938?
No, I think where Germany was by May or June of 1933.
Okay, but I mean, we've got the threat of martial law. We certainly have insurrection by Trump. Trump could die tomorrow, and nothing would really change. They would just have a martyr as all.
I'm not sure that's
They'd
true.
Make him a martyr.
I'm not sure that's true. I don't think. I think Trump is holding this thing together by force of personality. He's a very charismatic politician.
So you're saying that if Trump died tomorrow, we would reverse and start rolling back everything?
No, I'm not saying that, and nobody is calling for him to die tomorrow either, by the way. No, what I'm saying is that if, for whatever reason, J.D. Vance were to suddenly become president, that he would not have the power. He would have considerable power because he and a group of right-wing billionaires have the ability to destroy any Republican who stands up against them. But I think he would lose probably half of MAGA. They would lose their base.
But doesn't matter. He can do what he wants. He's the king.
Yeah.
We have a king, and it can be any step-in king. The Supreme Court and the legislature and everybody, unitary, whatever.
Yeah. Unitary executive.
2025, it's covered.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump is not as key as I think we are. Yeah, he's a popular figure and easy to identify, but all the mechanisms are in place. I feel so suffocated. And are the MAGAs Nazis? Really? Are they the brown shirts? Yes or no? I mean, are we seeing a reenactment of Germany? And who's going to come in and save us? I mean, the people of color and I'm just so upset. I can't even.
Yeah. I get it, Diane, and you know the analogies between what's going on right now in the United States and what happened in Germany in the 30s are imperfect, but they're startling in the number of concurrences. I think what's happening right now is much closer to what happened to Russia in 2001, 2002. You know, in Putin's. Or in 2010.
Politicians have to get out of the way. Either do what they should be doing or get out of the way and make room for someone braver.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, we've
got some brave people standing up. You know, Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker so far, and a number of members of Congress. Diane, thank you for the call. It's 44 and a half minutes past the hour. I'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Also, you got Congressman Khanna and Congressman Polk. Basically, the Progressive Caucus is standing up. I mean, look at how they're speaking out. And welcome back. Bill in Sun City, Arizona. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
You asked the previous caller what he might do to inspire somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the Bush administration, I took a piece of orange felt and I pinned it over my heart space. It inspired Cindy Sheehan to tell the people listening to her on the radio that day that his name is Bill. He's a peace warrior. It inspired a young girl here in town to write a young kid's anti-war novel. That Motorcycle Bill appears on page 109. He's the character with a piece of orange pinned over his heart space. When she signed the book, she told me I inspired. When she signed the book, she told me I inspired her.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, those are two stories from the naked city, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I call it my 3-cent solution. It's always been my 3-cent solution because people used to ask when we had the little station here that could in Phoenix, what can we do to get people to talk to us?
Mm-hmm.
So I invented the 3-cent solution, that little piece of orange pinned over my heart space, because you can ask me any question in the world that starts with you pointing to your own heart.
Mm-hmm. Sweet.
Tom, this is the way we win. The way we inspire people is one-on-one. When they look at you and they see, and if we could have a flood of these orange leaves, remember how you felt when you saw a flock of red hats, how your heart sunk.
Yep.
Let's
I
give
have
it back.
Paper clip here. Oh, apparently not.
Let's give it back to them.
Yeah.
Let's give it back to them.
Okay.
Let's make their hearts sink. Let's have a field of orange pins all over the place.
Okay, or paper clips or whatever. We all need to stand up. Bill, thank you, and good on you. David in North Miami Beach, Florida. Hey, David, what's up?
Yes, Professor. As you know, I've been listening to liberal talk since Bill Moyers on the IE network.
Mm-hmm.
But I have bad news for you. A few, and Glenn Beck are right about the fourth turning. COVID-19 was our World War II if you look at the percentage of population lost. And it says,
we lost 1 million people in COVID, and we lost, 450,000 in World War II, as I recall?
Yeah, and remember, there was a plan to let 6 million die in the name of herd immunity, which, of course, is a misunderstanding of how that works.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So it's as if we got FDR elected in 40, but then he tried to hand it off to, what was his original VP, Wallace, and it failed.
Mm-hmm.
That's the better. We're now in the McCarthy era.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, so that's the ugly part of the good and the bad. The good news is my dad's a Boomer fan who was lucky enough to meet Stephanie Miller and Nicole Sandler. Someday I hope he'll video chat you. The bad is the Trump Library down here in Miami. Jim DeFeeti did a story about it. I'm hoping I can get Dr. Myra Beers to run it because she has an actual PhD in history and she was my old classmate, and she's an attractive Cuban. So just maybe I can seek her in there to have some sanity in the project.
Yeah, step by step. Well, good luck with that, David.
Otherwise, it's trouble. And happy holidays, happy to my dear brother.
Okay. Well, thank you for the call. 49 minutes past the hour. Back with you in 60 seconds. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So what do we call the really, really mind-bogglingly rich? You know, at the founding of the Republic, they were referred to as speculators or moneyed interest or aristocrats. In the years leading up to the Civil War, we called them the cotton lords and the plantation aristocracy. In the late 19th century, they were the robber barons. In the 1930s, FDR called them the economic royalists. But since the Reagan Revolution, we've just called them billionaires. And now, you know, some of them want to call themselves tech bros. Like, that's kind of a good thing, you know, like tech is positive and bros, you know, like Mark Zuckerberg saying we need more masculine energy in American business culture. So we need a new phrase. I would like to suggest the morbidly rich. Morbidly suggests unhealthy. And the vast riches that some of these people have is unhealthy to our democracy, particularly since 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court said that morbidly rich people can buy politicians. And it's unhealthy for them, too. So morbidly rich. There's an op-ed over at HartmannReport.com all about it. Check it out. Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Pat in Evanston, Illinois. Pat, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. You had mentioned, or somebody did, about all the things that are happening to the judges and, you know, just people in general that Trump can call upon, not personally, but out there in the in the regions, to do these horrible things. Not one journalist has ever asked Trump not one journalist has ever asked, Mr. Trump, could you just say, no more of this? We've had enough of this. This is dangerous, people.
He wants more of it.
Will ask that
he
question.
wants chaos. He wants warfare. He wants to tear this country apart. That's how he thinks he can have power until the last day of his life. He wants to die in office. He wants to be a dictator for life.
Oh, for sure. I don't doubt that. But not one journalist can ask that question. You know, I mean, what's that guy's name?
Oh, he's got them completely intimidated.
You know what? That they won't be able to.
The White House press corps used to just mercilessly bombard Joe Biden with questions. They'd interrupt him in the middle of a sentence. He would let them get away with it. None of that happens now with Donald Trump there. They're all terrified of him. And it's showing. And now CBS is getting Barry Weiss as their news manager. I mean, we're hearing, you know, CBS reporters talking about, oh my God, you know, this is
it's just like
the right wingification.
And she said, you know, what are we going to do? Who's going to rescue us? It's sort of like that particular poem that came up through the Germany, whatever, you know.
Yeah, Pastor Niemöller's poem.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then they came after so-and-so, and when they came after me, there was nobody left.
Exactly.
And that's the way I feel.
Well, and that's the way it will play out if enough of us don't stand up and speak out and encourage our lawmakers and support our judges, encourage our lawmakers to stand strong. Pat, thank you for the call. Rick in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Hey, Rick, what's up? Rick in St. Cloud, listening on Sirius XM. Going once, going twice. John in San Francisco, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, John, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Calling from the progressive stronghold of Northern California. I'm on the Mendocino coast this week. And what folks can do today in Portland and any day, 7 days a week, to document the abuse of power that's taking place. When you go to a demonstration or you see anything taking place, do you remember back in 2020 on Memorial Day when a young girl photographed George Floyd being murdered by a cop?
Yeah.
She stood there for more than 9 minutes photographing it. Mm-hmm. That person did more to, get him some justice, his family some justice. And when Kristi Noem comes through Portland today, don't just take one photograph, surround her with cameras and use your phone as a documentarian device, because until they come up with an algorithm to defeat it.
I would argue people should just ignore her. They should not go down there. They shouldn't go near the ICE building. She wants to have a fight. Don't give it to her.
Yeah, well, this is everyday advice for everyday events, including today. And you don't have to be close. You can be 100 feet away. Mm-hmm. But what my point is the handheld cell phone is probably the single greatest, plus the computer device.
No, I get all that, but I don't know if you've been watching the news coverage, but in Chicago, they've been standing on the top of buildings and shooting people who are simply standing on the street with their cell phones, shooting them with these gas balls that can produce a concussion. They can do serious damage to you. They can destroy your vision, burn your cornea. So my advice to people is just to stay the hell away. But I totally get what you're saying, John. John, thank you for the call. Dee in Richmond, Virginia. Hey, Dee, what's on your mind today? Dee in Richmond, listening on Sirius XM.
Hey, Tom.
Hey,
Tom. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, I'm turning 65 on Wednesday, and I heard the tail end of your program where a caller called in, and he was saying that it's best to get original Medicare, and I just needed to know your perspective on it.
And
the why of it. Yeah.
So what's your question or your comment?
Why is the original Medicare better than doing the Medicare Advantage?
Oh, well, because with original Medicare, number one, they don't do what's called prior authorization. They don't require, with all the Medicare Advantage plans, every single time your doctor says, "Oh, you need an X-ray," it has to go to the insurance company to approve that X-ray. And about 18% of the time, they refuse to approve procedures. Why? Because they're run by and large by for-profit corporations that are looking at their bottom line. This is how their executives make millions of dollars a year in salary. And so with real Medicare, you don't have that, although they're going to start that in 6 states under this new Trump plan to destroy Medicare. They're going to start that January 1st. But by and large, real Medicare doesn't have that. Real Medicare actually pays the bills. And also on the Medicare Advantage plans, when you start getting older and sicker, they dump you. They can just drop you anytime they want. United Healthcare is dropping an estimated, from what I've seen in the press reports, 600,000 people because they're older and they're more expensive. And where do you go then? You can't get back on Medicare with a Medigap plan if you've been off it for more than 12 months. So it's a very dangerous thing in my mind, unless you absolutely can't afford real Medicare, to go with Medicare Advantage plans. Dee, thank you for the call. On the other side of the break, South Carolina wants to kill women. I mean this literally, execute women. Put them in front of a firing squad or hang them, or however they do it in South Carolina. They have the death penalty. Women who have gotten an abortion. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Libya and the Global Enduring Disorder by Jason Pack. And this is from the preface titled Welcome to the Enduring Disorder. Today's international system is like a ship adrift during a pandemic. With the captain lost to the virus and the most capable and conscientious members of the crew self-isolating in their cabins, the deck is now teeming with contagious megalomaniacs. Rather than collaborate, each thinks he knows how to steer the ship better than the admirals. As the winds pick up, a fight breaks out among those scrambling to infiltrate the bridge. When the winners emerge from this melee and they reach the captain's chair, some choose to deliberately steer into the choppiest waters, each clutching the steering wheel until a competitor bursts in behind them and ejects them from the hot seat. As the vessel craters from stem to stern, those with fainter constitutions or a greater respect for the competency hierarchy have simply chosen to retire to their cabins. Will the crew eventually reemerge from their quarters to put the technocrats back in charge? Might the most reckless passenger subjugate the others, lock the convalescent crew members in their quarters, and emerge as the new de facto captain? Or should some sort of self-sustaining equilibrium have been reached with the vessel zigging and zagging indefinitely, neither capsizing nor reaching port? From my vantage point, watching U.S. policy toward Libya veer this way and that over the years, the events of the spring and summer of 2019 stood out as a high watermark of chaos and contradiction with a multiplicity of relevant actors vying for prominence. They were also representative, in microcosm, of larger global trends. Witnessing them led me to question my assumptions about the West's future role in the world and the fundamental principles underpinning the international system. It was dawning on me that the contemporary ship of state had become permanently unmoored, careening back and forth due to contradictory decisions undertaken by ill-coordinated power centers. Plato envisioned such a scenario in The Republic. He warned that true democracy would lead to populism. Contempt for experts would ensue, eventually culminating in short-sighted and reversal-prone approaches to policy formation. He also warned that once this point was reached, it would be nearly impossible to put the genie back in the bottle. Over the past few years, my day-to-day experience of the foreign policy-making process in Washington, London, and Tunis, and the resulting outcomes in Libya, seem to be embodying Plato's forecasts. In keeping with this observation, this book proposes that the international system has exited the post-Cold War period with its well-established features and dynamics and entered a new historical epoch termed the Enduring Disorder. This new historical period, which remains under-researched, is characterized by its own structures, trends, and interactions. They are not scientific laws that can be definitely discovered through experimentation, but rather patterns and trend lines that may be intuited from lived experience. My main contentions about our historical moment are interrelated. One, that the international system's interaction with Libya is an ideal arena to describe the key features of this new historical era, but that study of the Syrian, Yemeni, Venezuelan, or Ukrainian microcosms would likely work as well. And two, that the enduring disorder will long outlast the specific sequence of events set in motion by former American President Donald Trump or any given Libyan warlord. My analysis is that their emergence on the world stage was merely symptomatic of the enduring disorder, not its root cause. Actually, it is the enduring disorder that has given rise to Trump, Brexit, and the unique trajectories of state implosion that have befallen Libya, Yemen, and Syria. On the ground in Libya in May of 2019, the latest round of civil war had settled into an uneasy stalemate. Economic activity was stymied. The water and electricity grids were periodically shut down by the combatants. Civilian casualties mounted, and international peacemaking efforts had ground to a halt. The previously bustling southern suburbs of Tripoli were now crisscrossed by the ebb and flow of tanks and technicals. A parallel war of maneuver was also unfolding on the banks of the Potomac. The allies of President Trump sought to outflank the permanent institutions of the U.S. government in the tussle to shape American policy toward Libya's perpetual conflict. This was yet another skirmish between familiar adversaries. In the prior battles between Team Trump and U.S. institutions that set various aspects of Russia, Ukraine, and the Middle Eastern policy, each side had already demonstrated its unique strengths and weaknesses. This dynamic of Team Trump versus the institutions would become intimately familiar to all Americans during the tug of war to set the governmental response to the COVID pandemic. So what were the relative tactics of the adversaries? Trump's Twitter bravado was highly effective at manipulating the media, but usually quite impotent at formally changing entrenched U.S. government policies. Was the president actually trying to change American policy, but exhibiting a lack of understanding of the tools open to the executive branch? Or was he achieving his aim simply by strewing confusion, creating uncertainty, and preventing coherent coordination with America's allies? The book Libya and the Global Enduring Disorder by Jason Back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to our third hour. So here we are. This is the third time in 2 years that MAGA Republicans in South Carolina have put forward legislation that would put to death South Carolinian women who get abortions. And it's even worse than that. This is what's truly astonishing is that the odds are this is the first time you've heard about this. This is the third time they've tried this. One of these times they'll get it through. South Carolina already ranks 8th in the nation, 8th worst in the nation in terms of infant mortality. Excuse me, maternal mortality, mothers dying in childbirth or because of pregnancy. The MAGA extremists clearly want them to become number one. This bill is called Senate Bill 323 in the South Carolina Senate. It's called the Unborn Child Protection Act. It changes the legal definition of the word person to include everything from a fertilized egg all the way up to a fetus. So if you get an abortion, you have killed a person. And this is called fetal personhood. This is a fetal personhood bill. And, none of these have passed anywhere so far, but they are the holy grail of the hard right, anti-abortion crackpots and the Catholic Church. This bill, Senate Bill 323 in South Carolina, would make a abortion a felony, punishable by the death sentence. It would allow 30 years in prison for aiding someone in getting an abortion. Did you drive her to the clinic? 30 years in prison. Did you have a telephone conversation with her about it? Did you encourage her? 30 years in prison. It would prohibit transporting a minor out of state to get an abortion. So if your 13-year-old daughter gets raped, and you try to drive her out of South Carolina to, say, New York to get an abortion, you go to prison for 30 years. It would ultimately restrict all forms of contraception, except arguably condoms, because, after all, the Catholic Church preaches, and these people believe, and now increasingly evangelical Protestant churches are preaching, that life begins the moment the sperm meets the egg, or in the Catholic tradition, that life begins the moment people decide that they're going to hop into bed and, get it on. It would restrict in vitro fertilization, because with in vitro fertilization, you pull a bunch of eggs out of the mother's ovary, stick a needle through the stomach and pull them out. And then you get some sperm from dad and you fertilize the, this half a dozen eggs. And then you very carefully, microscopically examine them and see which ones are forming correctly, as opposed to which ones might be, forming in ways that might reflect problems down the road, like birth defects. And you take the healthiest of those eggs and you implant that one healthy egg in mom, but now you've got, 5, 6 fertilized eggs left over? Under this law, those are people. If you pour those fertilized eggs in the toilet or down the drain, you have committed 5 or 6 felony murders. You have become a serial killer. And again, South Carolina has the death penalty for this sort of thing. It would ban possession of any drug or substance that could be used to produce an abortion. So you order some abortion medication, some mifepristone, through the mail. It arrives. The police come to your door and find it. You go to jail for 30 years. And it would criminalize information about abortion, including websites and phone calls. So you've got a website with abortion information on it. South Carolina may actually send somebody to arrest you. And if you live in another red state, they may well extradite you because of your website, because of your so-called free speech here in America. And finally, this legislation would force public school students to watch a movie, a video called Meet Baby Olivia, which is produced by this anti-abortion fanatic group called Live Action. Mark my words. Overturning Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision was just the beginning. These religious freaks who want to impose their religious beliefs on all the rest of us, on this nation, are not going to stop. We had the author of the 7 Mountain Mandate on the program yesterday. They are not going to stop. They are hell-bent for leather to convert this nation into a theocracy. They want to make America like Iran, where the mullahs run the show, where morality, their version of morality, is rigorously enforced, where trans people don't exist, where queer people are quiet and in the closet or face horrible fates, where, some of them, the Bible endorses slavery in multiple places. Even Paul, the guy who basically, made Christianity happen 100 years after Jesus. Even Paul said, treat your slaves well, but it's okay if you have slaves. Some of these guys are even saying, oh yeah, the mark of Cain, that's black people, and they really should be enslaved. They're not going to stop until they've got this country back where it was prior to the Civil War. It's amazing. Speaking of, and do you think they're going to get away with it, by the way? Do you think South Carolina will pass? Or if they don't, what other red state is it going to be? Alabama? Louisiana? Who's next? Texas? Meanwhile, Donald Trump was asked by CNN's Caitlin Collins if he's thinking about pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell. And his answer was extraordinarily revealing. The first thing he said was, well, I hadn't heard that name in a long time. Yeah. This guy, if his lips are moving, he's lying. 9 times out of 10, that old axiom, that old joke, that old cliche actually applies to Donald Trump. In his first term in office, in 4 years in office, the Washington Post compiled over 34,000 documented lies that Donald Trump told. I've seen a couple news reports recently suggesting that he's averaging between 8 and 15 lies a day right now. So anyhow, he says, I haven't heard that name in a long time. Come on. We know that Todd Blanche went to the prison to talk to Ghislaine Maxwell and got her to say that you had nothing to do with Jeffrey and you weren't raping those little girls. And then they moved her to this country club prison where she is training dogs for the police departments and taking nice long walks and out on the volleyball court and practicing her tennis. I haven't heard that name in so long. And then he says, I can say this, that I'd have a look at it. I'd have to take a look. And Caitlin Collins says, but she was convicted of child sex trafficking. And Donald Trump says, yeah, I know. I mean, I'm going to have to take a look at it. I have to ask the Department of Justice. He's got to ask Pam. Isn't that sweet? I doubt he'll give her the pardon before the election next November, but God only knows. I mean, he may think that this is the way to basically, end the whole discussion, to put the whole Epstein files thing to bed. Pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, this is like with January 6th, with the January 6th guys. Just pardon Ghislaine Maxwell and say, we went through the Epstein files. We had 1,000 FBI agents go through them, and my name does not exist anywhere in them because it's been blacked out. And screw y'all, we're just going to move on from here. Nobody in this administration is going to talk about Maxwell or Epstein or anything like that anymore ever again. And he just enforces that codicil. And any Republican who speaks up loses their seat in Congress. I mean, he's already threatening Thomas Massie and Marge Green with that. I'm not sure if he's going after Nancy Mace yet, but she's not speaking out very much. Speaking of Epstein, Mike Johnson is refusing to swear in Adelita Grijalva into the House of Representatives. Now, she was elected, a couple of weeks ago? And she points out that the last 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, the last 3 people who were elected in special elections were all sworn in within 24 hours of winning their elections. But here's the thing. Thomas Massie, the Republican, and Ro Khanna, the Democrat, have this discharge petition to force Mike Johnson to allow a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives about whether the House can subpoena the records, all the Epstein records from Pam Bondi, who is tenaciously hanging on to them, her and Kash Patel. Oh, no, you can't have these. What are they hiding? They're obviously hiding something. So, Grijalva says that she's going to be the 218th vote. That's all it takes to put it on the floor to force that vote. And then every Republican in Congress is on the record on whether they want to continue the Epstein cover-up, the Epstein-Trump cover-up, we should call it. Every single one, on the record. And so Mike Johnson is like, we can't have that. We're not going to swear her in. Oh, no. Well, let me tell you, it's going to have to happen eventually. And when it does, it's going to be the 218th vote. And this is not, I think Trump is getting close to wanting to just rip the bandage off. And like I said, I think that that's going to be, pardoning Ghislaine and just telling everybody, screw you, just sort of like they did with the Mueller report. The Mueller report is still redacted. And it identified at least 10 instances of criminal obstruction of justice into the Russia investigation by Donald Trump himself. They are identified in there, bullet pointed, and an awful lot of it that talks about Trump's actual crimes related to Russia or affiliation with Russia are still deleted.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I predict they're going to do the exact same thing with the Epstein files and try to put it to bed. We're not talking about the Mueller report anymore, after all. What say you? Welcome back. Joe in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
A whole lot, Tom. Great show as always. If more people listen to you, they would actually understand what's actually happening. I did think that I had a suggestion for the Republicans in South Carolina that think it's a great idea to punish women, is to maybe spend that time, instead of pushing legislation to restrict the freedoms of others, is maybe just spend that time praying to God to stop committing God abortions, because we have about 1 million miscarriages every year in this country.
1 out of every 4
So
pregnancies ends in miscarriage.
Yeah, so why don't they spend their time praying for him to stop doing his abortions? The other thing I wanted to mention to you is here in Oklahoma, they're forcing it's called the God Bless America or God Bless USA Bible into the schools. I didn't know if you were aware, but it excludes the 11th through the 27th Amendments.
Really?
By no accident. Yeah, absolutely.
Because they don't like the 14th Amendment and they don't like the 26th or 7th that says that you can't run for a third term?
That's right. So that part of the Constitution was left out of the Bible that it's married with in that sixth book.
This is the Trump Bible, right? The one that Trump is hustling for $60?
Yeah, I think they took the one they've got in the schools right now is called God Bless the USA, which sounds like a real violation of church and state.
Yeah.
The other thing, a couple of quick factoids that you might be interested in. You always hear the Republicans go, Donald Trump doesn't take a paycheck. Every one of the Trump family members has seen their net worth.
Explode.
This is assets minus liabilities in the last 10 months go 300 to 900%. I'll give you one example. Rancid Donald Trump Jr., his net worth at the end of 24 was $50 million. It's currently $500 million. Forbes just listed Trump at $7.2 billion. When he entered office, he might have been at $1 billion. So anyone not taking a paycheck and they're getting a net worth return of 900%, I think that's corruption on steroids.
Yeah.
Lastly, they just reported that the seasonal hiring that normally takes place about this time of year is at a 16-year low.
Yep.
So that's not good news. There's just a laundry list.
If we weren't building AI centers right now, we would be in recession. That's the one thing that's holding up the economy, and that's dangerous. That's like in 1999 when we had the dot-com bubble. Read the Financial Times. They're just like all over this. There's a half a dozen columnists over there who've been, ringing this bell for weeks that, we're sleepwalking into an economic disaster.
Yeah, Paycom here in Oklahoma just laid off 500 people. Whoa. And the reason they gave was that AI will now be doing those jobs. And here's the beautiful thing is AI replaces those jobs. Those data centers are going to drain your water and your electricity. And I'll tell you what, the Republicans eventually will be in the streets with the Democrats. And, of course, Trump is all ready to use the military because Hegseth will do anything he says.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But right now, electric bills are going up at twice the inflation rate all across the country because of these data centers. Thank you, Joe. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Way back in 1964, when Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Republicans started this rant about how the election of 1960, Jock Kennedy stole that election, and there's voter fraud in America. And it became a thing. They started this thing called Operation Eagle Eye. William Rehnquist was running it in Arizona, trying to intimidate Hispanics and African Americans into not voting, essentially. They have now used this claim that non-citizens are voting, this voter fraud claim, in virtually every red state to make it harder to vote, to purge people off the voting rolls, to make people's votes not counted with their exact signature matches. It's a scam. It's a grift that they've been running for 60 years, and the American media won't call them out on it. There's a whole piece about it called Trump and the GOP's Big Lie 2.0 over at HartmannReport.com. Please check it out. You'll find it fascinating.
Trump
shut the gates, locked the doors, took the food from the kids, left the poor on the floor. Said if you can't pay, you don't belong, while his friends count gold and toast to the con. He's tearing it down, brick by brick, ripping the spine from the government quick. Trump's last job, the final heist, leave the people starving while the billionaires slice.
25 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. TJ in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Hey, TJ, what's up?
Thanks for taking my call, Tom.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to try to focus on solutions.
Mm-hmm.
What is the solution? Now, you just gave out the number of Congress, and that's the solution. But I've learned from my experience calling my congressperson. After about a year, I listened to their aide that takes all the messages.
Mm-hmm.
I was calling for action. I wanted some action on something, right?
Yeah.
And I hear them say, well, we'll pass your message on,
right,
or your opinion,
right,
or your statement. No, I had a request.
Yeah. I'm assuming you're represented by a Democrat, by a Republican, excuse me, TJ?
Yeah, I'm a representative by a Republican. This is a red state.
Yeah.
But some of the solution is, to me, we have to first get rid of gerrymandering.
Mm-hmm.
That is screwing up the whole system all the way up.
Yeah.
And, we need to get rid of that. And we should request town hall meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Up here, the lady, the representative, she'll meet, over the phone maybe or some high-tech way. But that's not like eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm really concerned about where we're heading with our great country, and having a president rule by executive orders. That's about as close to dictatorship as we can get without being in a dictatorship.
Yeah. Well, Trump is dancing in that direction increasingly rapidly, and it's a very, very it's an amazing time to be alive here, TJ. TJ, thanks for the call. 27 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a few minutes here on the other side of this break at the bottom of the hour. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with you.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work by Robert H. Frank. And I'm reading from the prologue. That we are more closely connected to one another than most of us realize is an old idea. An important variation dates from 1929, when Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthy published a short story entitled Chains. Two of the story's main characters speculate that any two living people can be connected by a chain involving no more than 5 acquaintances. That some such chains exist is hardly surprising, since most of us can think of people in distant locations to whom we're connected through a small number of intermediaries. The man bites dog aspect of Karinthy's conjecture is that almost any two people, A and E, could be linked by a chain like A knows B, B knows C, C knows D, who knows E. One of the first systematic attempts to test this claim came in the 1960s with a series of experiments by the psychologist Stanley Milgram. In it, he sent packages containing a small booklet to 96 people chosen at random from the Omaha, Nebraska telephone directory. His cover letter asked them to try to forward the booklet to a specific residence of Boston, Massachusetts, through a chain of personal acquaintances. He told them the name and address of the Boston resident, that he worked as a stockbroker, and that the first person in their chain should be somebody they knew on a first-name basis. Milgram also advised them to choose someone they believed, presumably based on the target's location and occupation, could be socially closer to the target than they were themselves. Subsequent recipients in the chain were asked to forward the same instructions. Many of the Omaha recipients undoubtedly tossed Milgram's booklet in the trash, so it's remarkable that the Boston Target received 18 of the 96 packages. The average number of links in the 18 chains was 5.9. But the now familiar expression 6 degrees of separation would not gain broad currency until many years later, when John Guare's play by that name premiered on Broadway in 1990. The concept became a meme in full when 4 Albright College students introduced 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon in 1994, a game designed to measure the professional proximity of an actor, living or dead, to the American film star Kevin Bacon. An actor has a Bacon number of 1, for example, if he or she appeared in the same film with Bacon. Someone who appeared in a film with another actor who appeared in a film with Bacon has a Bacon number of 2, and so on. The average Bacon number is 2.95 among actors who have one. In that group, even the actor most distant from Bacon, William Rufus Shafter, has a Bacon number of only 7. Shafter, a Union Army officer during the Civil War, appeared in 2 films in 1898. For academics who study social connectedness, the 6 degrees concept gained little traction until 1998. That's when the sociologist Duncan Watts and the mathematician Steve Straga published their landmark paper, Collective Dynamics of Small World Networks in Nature. In the years since then, this paper has provided the mathematical foundation for the analytical tools that social scientists have been using with such remarkable success to study how ideas and behaviors spread through populations like infectious diseases. It has already been cited by other scholars more than 38,000 times and is one of the few papers ever published to be among the most widely cited works in multiple disciplines. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins coined the term meme, which Webster now defines as an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. The meme is to cultural transmission, Dawkins argued, as the gene is to biological transmission. One of Charles Darwin's central insights was that natural selection favors genetic variations that enhance the individual organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Much of the time, the same variations also benefit larger groups, but often not. For example, an inclination to cheat when no one's looking might benefit individuals, but widespread cheating almost always makes matters worse for groups. It is the same with memes. The memes that propagate most successfully are often ones that benefit both individuals and groups. But here too, not always. As the legal scholar Jeffrey Stake has argued, ideas should not be treated as inert products, but as living things that sometimes exert some influence over their environment. Some of the ideas are more adept at surviving than others, and the ones that survive will not necessarily be good for humans. It is often hard to evaluate whether a specific behavior even qualifies as a meme, and if so, whether its consequences on balance are positive or negative. Yet sometimes the evidence is clear. We know, for example, that the strongest predictor of whether people will take up smoking is the proportion of their close friends who smoke. Smoking is thus clearly a meme. The negative health consequences of smoking are also conclusively documented, and most smokers themselves express regret over having started. By definition, then, smoking unambiguously qualifies as a socially destructive meme. On the other side of the ledger, we have compelling evidence that the adoption of photovoltaic solar panels is both socially contagious and almost uniformly positive in terms of environmental consequences. Accordingly, few would object to calling the practice a socially beneficial meme. Adam Smith, widely considered the father of economics, is often cited in defense of the claim that competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank.
Help support Progressive Radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. Back in 1968, when Lyndon Johnson was president, Earl Warren resigned from the Supreme Court. He was a liberal, even though he had been appointed by Eisenhower. Johnson wasn't able to replace him. in part because of Republican opposition in the Senate. And so when Nixon came in, he had this opening, but he wanted to have two openings. He wanted to get rid of Abe Fortas, who was the most liberal member of the court. So he had his Attorney General, John Mitchell, start an investigation into Abe Fortas's wife. Now, there was nothing there. There was no smoke at all. She had done absolutely nothing wrong, and history has proven that. But they were going to drag her before a grand jury and possibly before Congress and just, drag her through the mud. And this caused Abe Fortas to resign, and that gave Nixon two openings, and that's how the court turned to the right. I'm suggesting that Democrats should do the same thing with Justice Thomas. I've got an op-ed about it at Hartmann Report. You can read it over there. Check it out.
They said it was a fair fight, democracy at play. But behind the curtain, shadows stole the day. Purged from the rolls, voices erased, an election twisted, democracy disgraced. But Greg Palast hit the trail with truth as his guide, exposing the schemes they tried to hide.
And that same Greg Palast will be with me in LA and San Diego coming up next week. So a lot of good stuff going on. Dave in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. Hey, Dave, thanks for listening to WCPT. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Last hour or so, you were talking with that one caller that was a former Vietnam guy and talking about with the draft and the all-volunteer. I hope you weren't throwing shade at people that went in the all-volunteer because after Vietnam, that conflict of Vietnam that basically we lost, they turned it around. We started using the Stop-a-Loss program, the military's policies. That started right around the conflicts since the Gulf War and deployments to Somalia and Haiti and all the other wars.
Forcing people to stay in, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm definitely not throwing shade on people who volunteer for our armed services. It's a noble thing to do. And it's also a great opportunity for people who live in parts of the country where there's no opportunity at all. The problem is that volunteer armies, and there's just a huge body of research on this, volunteer armies are far more vulnerable to being involved in coup attempts than our drafted armies. They tend to be more monolithic politically.
Well, hey, Tom, if you remember, too, at the last one, when Bush Jr. and that was in, when the recruiting numbers and stuff were down, they started using National Guards and reserve units. They started using them like a backdoor draft on that one.
You're right.
You're right. And if you recall, people that had been in the Guards and the reserves that were using it like an extra income because they don't send us nowhere.
Right.
Like Bush did in that one.
Yeah.
Well, they had, all of a sudden, when they were getting sent over, they had nice jobs ahead of time, and all of a sudden, no more of that
I was doing this show
money.
when that happened, Dave, and people were calling in, yelling and screaming about it. Hey, my husband just got shipped off to Iraq. He joined the National Guard because he wanted to do sandbags if the rivers overflowed, and he wanted to serve his community, and he wanted to have a second job on the weekends, but, he didn't want to go fight a damn war. He didn't sign up for the National Guard for that. Unless America gets invaded.
What happens now with these guys that they've been deploying to Chicago and Portland, and these guys are getting exhausted, and that's the
and most of them have real jobs.
Pulling in.
And most of them have real jobs, and it's screwing up the private employers. It's screwing up their lives. I get it, Dave. I get it.
Yeah,
Dave, I got to move along, but thanks for the call. Thanks for pointing that out. Steve in Phoenix. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I wanted to just talk to my friend in the bunker there for a minute there. Hope you're doing okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. We're here in war-ravaged Portland, but we're doing good.
Indeed. This bill he signed, this big, beautiful bill, and we'll just add for billionaires. That's what it really should be called.
I'm increasingly calling it the big billionaire bill because you're right.
Yes, for billionaires. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And all these screwballs, goofballs, nut jobs who were out there complaining before the election last year, ooh, the egg prices are too high.
"Oh, Joe, I don't know. He's looking a little old. I don't know. I think we just need a change." Well, other than this stupid bill that he signed that just vastly increased the billionaire's wealth, it threw a few bones to the average person, this and that. And by the way, they expire after, 3 years or so, 4 years? But the billionaires, that goes into perpetuity. Some of these crazy people who call your show, I'd like to know, what do they think that Trump has done for them? Just what has he done for them?
He's gone after the brown people. And he's fired a whole bunch of black people. I mean, what you've got here in, both in the Trump administration and in the MAGA base, not entirely, but, largely, are people who are, big advocates of white Christian nationalism, specifically white nationalism. And, Trump, Pete Hegseth said it the other day when he was speaking to the troops, that basically black people got there because somebody was trying to meet a quota.
Yes, the DEI supposedly stuff.
Yeah.
Which
is a boatload of crap.
It totally is. These people are getting their pockets picked six ways to Sunday.
They literally don't understand what DEI is. DEI says, don't hire people who are less qualified. Just expand the pool of people that you're considering who are all equally qualified. It's just what they're doing is just so wrong. It's nuts. Steve, thanks for the call. Spot on. Mary in Seattle. Hey, Mary, what's up?
Hi. I just wanted to tell you, and especially the listener that called in asking you about what's the difference between Medicare Advantage and Medicare is. You mentioned that it's hard to get on Medicare after you've been on Medicare Advantage, and I just wanted to let people know not to be discouraged, because for my husband and I, we got off Medicare Advantage, got on to Medicare, and got a Medigap policy, and it wasn't a problem.
Oh, really? And you've been on more than 12 months?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm impressed. You must be healthy. Well, you must both be healthy, because they can underwrite you after 12 months. See, if you sign up with a Medigap policy at 65, they have a published price, and you are quoted that price, and that's the price you pay, and they can't change it. The law very rigidly regulates those policies. But if you've been more than 12 months off of real Medicare without a Medigap policy, then the Medigap companies, the companies that provide Medigap plans, they can do what's called underwriting. In other words, they can look through your health history, and if your health history is at all sketchy, they can quote you a much higher price or even refuse to write a policy for you. Whereas they can't do that if you haven't been off for more than 12 months.
Well, I got off because I had a possibility of breast cancer, which didn't, it was negative, but
thankfully
they wouldn't cover, the Medicare Advantage would not cover procedures related to my biopsy. So that's when I got off.
Yeah.
So, other than that, I'm healthy.
Yeah. Well, that's probably it's because you're healthy. But, beware. and they still, I believe, now, this is a question for Alex Lawson, over at Social Security Works, but I believe that next year, the year after that, or whenever, you start getting older and sicker, that Medigap provider can still have the option of underwriting you. In other words, jacking the prices up crazy because you had been off for 12 months. Now, like I said, fact check that, call the Social Security Works people and ask them. But I believe that that's how the law works. So, Mary, good luck. And thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
Yeah, good talking to you. Norm in Deerfield, Illinois. Hey, Norm, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi. Pleasure to speak to you. I had a question about what you think the strategies are, the key strategies to turn the tide in the midterms. And if you think that simply running against Trump, although I think it's getting easier every day to run against his record, but without a positive message, do you think that can be won?
Well, one of the things that we've been seeing ever since 2016, when Bernie jumped into the primary, is that a progressive message polls better than, the old kind of neoliberal Clinton message, basically. Bernie's positions on the issues actually poll really, really well, and the more progressive candidates have just been knocking it out of the park, whereas the kind of average Democrat candidates have not. They've done well. I mean, there's definitely an anti-Trump sentiment out there. So I would encourage, local parties to be putting up primary candidates who are genuine progressives, and I would encourage genuine progressives in politics to stand up and speak out on behalf of what they believe. Make sense?
It makes some sense. I just worried that last election, the last presidential election, that the progressive message got a little, I don't know.
Well, they lied about it. They just lied about it. You can't stop Republicans from lying, Norm. Norm, thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
In fact, they're still lying about it. Transgender for everybody and, health care for illegal immigrants. Quack, quack, quack. They're still lying about it. And welcome back, Rob in Mesa, Arizona. Hey, Rob, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Hey, I just want to give a generic, if we all just start acting like the world in general and here in the States, got to act more like Martin Luther King and use his tactics of peaceful demonstration.
Yes.
And I bring that up because, just like you said, Trump is looking for a fight. And all these protests that are going on, he's just waiting for some MAGA on the guard side.
I don't think he's just waiting.
Outside.
I think he's trying to provoke it.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why we, more than ever, need to go to these events, and not as a protest, but as witnesses.
Yes.
So when ICE comes in and starts taking people, we need to use our cameras and say, what's your name? What's your name? Get their names, because that could protect them from just disappearing. And we need to just have the cameras out there and do that. The same with like the No King's Day coming up. I would say stand in the back. We need witnesses in the background looking for the troublemakers. Just like the MLB, the Black Lives Matter incident where that one guy was breaking windows, basically trying to, instigate.
The off-duty police officer who started the window smashing in Minneapolis, right-wing guy. Yeah, pretending to be a protester.
Right, large groups to stand kind of in the background looking for these people. We need to, have the cameras ready, looking for the troublemakers.
Yeah,
and that's all I'm saying is that we need peaceful. You got to resist anything violent because, again,
here in Portland, there have been a number of people, mostly boomers, who are showing up at ICE specifically to try to talk down some of the young people who are coming to that ICE building, spoiling for a fight. I've heard a couple of anecdotal reports about that, and the Oregonian, our local newspaper, has reported on that as well.
Yeah, good approach, because like I said, we got to get into the minds, because he's basically trying to demonize these people against the United States.
Yeah.
They used to be like, you view them as protecting life and property, but now it's kind of like, oh, wait, that's us against them now.
He wants a civil war, and I don't want to give it to him, and I don't think any of us should. Rob, thank you. Well said. Tiffany in San Francisco. Hey, Tiffany, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I was just wondering, what does it take to have a congressperson sworn in, specifically with regard to the Arizona congresswoman who was duly elected? Can we not just have a handful of Democratic Congress members, have her put her hand on the Bible, swear her in, and say, okay, it's done, she's been elected, we've sworn her in?
I'm not sure. I don't know if this is House rules or some arcane law or rule in the Constitution. What I read in the paper this morning was that a Supreme Court justice could swear her in. So, if she felt it was profoundly urgent, she could go knock on Elena Kagan's doors, or Sonia Sotomayor, or Justice Jackson Brown, or Brown Jackson, but Ketanji Brown Jackson. But I suspect that this is working well for the Democrats in terms of publicity. The fact that she's being locked out in order to prevent a vote on the Epstein files. I believe that that's the case. I mean, nobody knows for sure because Mike Johnson isn't saying why he's refusing to swear her in. It's the thing that makes the most sense. But it might also be that, Congress is out of session right now. They're on vacation. And so he's just saying, I'm not going to do it until the vacation's over. I don't think it's going to work for him, Tiffany. I really don't. I think it's...
how the Republicans can hold it up.
Yeah, there you go. Tiffany, good talking to you. Thank you for the call. 49 and a half minutes past the hour. Back with you in 60 seconds. Stay with us. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So between his tax cuts and crashing the debt ceiling and shifting billions of Treasury dollars into crypto and tariffs and all this other stuff, Trump is threatening to crash our economy. And he doesn't seem to be particularly worried about that. Why would that be? Well, first off, economic disasters are great excuses to cut taxes. Both Reagan and George W. Bush used recessions as their excuse to stimulate the economy by cutting trillions from the taxes of billionaires. Secondly, economic crises increase the tolerance for strongman governments. Hitler rode to power in Europe based on the Great Depression. And third, billionaires make a fortune when there's a market crash because they can buy all the stock that average people are trying to unload from their 401ks to pay the damn rent. There's a whole article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Crashing the Economy, Trump's Blueprint for Power and Profit. Check it out. Welcome back. 9 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. David in Spokane. Hey, David, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Earlier you mentioned Ted Cruz running for president.
Mm-hmm.
He can't. He's ineligible. He was born in Calgary, Alberta. I'm a Flames fan. I've been to Calgary many times. I really like it there. And also, I don't know, have you ever seen Michael Moore's Canadian Bacon? I have it on DVD. I got it when Blockbuster went out of business. Watched it over the weekend. Great movie. The U.S. and Canada go to war. And I'm wondering if the reason why Trump wants to annex Canada, so Ted Cruz can run for president. And also, I told your call.
Wait a second, David. Before you move on to that, and I'll let you come back to it. But Ted Cruz ran for president. He's run for president twice now. How come no Republican has ever stood up and said, "Wait a minute"?
Oh, I've been saying that back in 2016. It's like he can't run for president, and there was a lot of people were agreeing with me. So if he was the nominee, there would be a lawsuit challenging him.
Yeah.
And then the lady from Seattle, she was born in India. Zoran was born in Africa. They could throw their hat into the ring and make the same case.
Yeah, you're right. He was born at the Foothills Medical Center in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, on December 22nd, 1970. Although his mother was born in Wilmington, Delaware. She was a U.S. citizen, but his father was wasn't he a Cuban refugee or a Cuban immigrant to Canada?
I think it comes down to where you were actually born, not your parents.
Yeah.
And my brother shares the same birthday, and I share the same birthday as Mark Pocan, but I'm 1 day older than John Fetterman. I tried to get out on August 13 when you had Mark Pocan on to wish him a happy birthday and let him know that.
Yeah, well, that's sweet.
So next year, kind of remind Mark Pocan when he comes on. I wish him a late happy birthday from David in Spokane.
Yeah. So here, this is over at PolitiFact. It says, can Ted Cruz run for president if he was born in Canada? The Republican senator from Texas says he can. He renounced his Canadian citizenship, which he didn't even know he had, apparently. He was born in Canada in 1970 because his father was working for the oil industry there. His recently released birth certificate shows his mother was born in Delaware and his father was born in Cuba. They left Canada a few years later. He grew up in Texas, blah-de-blah-de-blah. By virtue of his American-born mother, Cruz considers himself a natural-born citizen. So is there the tiniest sliver of uncertainty? Yes, there's that too. So PolitiFact basically says we can't say for sure one way or the other. It's going to be up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, because natural-born citizen, to me, it sounds like somebody who's actually born in the U.S.
Well, according to Republicans in 2000, what was the year that, 2008 when Obama first ran? Absolutely. Okay, David, thank you for the call. That's a good one. Clay in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Hey, Clay, what's up?
Well, Ghislaine Maxwell, I would like to see her pardoned and then tell all the details that she knows about what happened.
Well, that might be the one reason he doesn't pardon her, because then she would have absolute immunity, but she would owe him so much that I suspect if he pardons her, she'll just go quietly away. You know, she'll just go off and live her life someplace. I mean, she comes from a very wealthy family. You know, her father, Robert Maxwell, was a major media baron in the UK. So
well, that was my thought.
Okay, well, she's got a pile of money. I think she'll be fine. Clay, thanks for the call. Frank in Cottonwood, Arizona. Hey, Frank, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom.
Hey.
The Arizona special election was held in 6 counties, and they've done all their work and doing their final T's and dotting their I's. And the Secretary of State, his office and his election team will come out with the final canvas on the October 14th. And
is this on the election of Adelita Grijalva?
Exactly.
Okay.
She's not duly elected yet. The unofficial list shows her she's definitely the winner. They have to just go through all the rain dance.
But that's not the excuse that Mike Johnson is using.
I know they're using other excuses.
I mean, that may be technically true, but that's not what he's using. But thanks, Frank, for the information. CJ in Shreveport, Louisiana. Hey, CJ, what's on your mind today?
Hey, well,
I have 30 seconds,
I
by
have
the
two
way.
different subjects I'd like to talk about. You can pick one. One is about personhood, the South Carolina thing. The other is about the 2026 election.
You got 20 seconds, CJ. You have the last word here.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and say the 2026 elections. If they do cancel that, then the term still for Congress still end on January 3rd. The House becomes completely vacant. The Senate has 2/3 of its members remaining, of which there would be a majority Democrat. So please don't throw us into that briar patch.
Oh, interesting. Okay, CJ, thanks for the call. That was a great one. And you did it in 20 seconds. I'm impressed. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. You know, Lord willing, and the city doesn't burn down. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you. Stay safe. And if you are here in Portland and you do go down to the ICE building, please stay peaceful, stay away. Don't get involved. You know, don't give them what they want. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.